Hello and welcome to Future of University Spaces. We're glad you're joining us today for this conversation on what's next for architecture, sustainability, and digitalization of university spaces. My name is Camila Barquero, and together with Igor Spirin, I'm the organizer of today's evening. Here with me is also Ione Lukahak. Hi, Ione, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having us here, and I'm excited for the whole conversation and what we're going to learn today.
Great, Ione. Thank you for being here today. Ione and I will be your host for today's evening. So it's awesome to have you here today, Ione. So
Likewise.
no matter if you're a student, a teacher, or work at a university in any other form, you will get here many ideas on how to make our campuses better. We have a great lineup of 11 speakers, from professors and students to industry professionals, who will present their research and ideas about the future of university spaces. There's one thing we want to address before we start with the conference, and it is we stand with all Ukrainians suffering from the Russian invasion. The conference was planned months ago, and since it's part of a university course, couldn't be postponed. But our thoughts are today with Ukraine. Now back to the conference. What is our schedule for today? Well, our first block is Future Campus, where we will talk about factors that will shape university buildings and about their roles in the city and in the fight against climate change. Our second block, which will be moderated by Ione, revolves around the power of digital tools in interacting and engaging students into virtual and hybrid spaces. We will also talk about how they can make education more accessible for all. And in the third block, we have Dr. Piet van der Zanden and Anne Brill, who will discuss how university spaces can start adapting today to be ready for tomorrow's learning. Before we start, we want to know you better. So tell us in the chat, where are you watching this from? Don't forget, you can always use the chat function to ask questions and to share your thoughts with us today. Having said that, I think we can start with our first block. Therefore, we want to welcome Tristan Moore. Tristan is a consultant with Arup and an expert in urban design, technology projects, and strategic planning. In his talk, he will address factors that will shape campuses in the future. And for those watching, remember that you can ask Tristan questions in the chat. Well, Tristan, having said that, I'd say the floor is yours.
Apologies. Can you hear me? I see in the chat that I can go ahead, so I will go ahead.
Yes, we can hear perfectly.
There we go.
I hope you're doing fine. We're very excited to listen to your report today.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry for that. We wouldn't be able to start a presentation without some kind of technical challenge, would we? Now, thanks for inviting me for this. It's really good to be with European friends and colleagues, particularly at this time. I'm going to be sharing with you some key findings from a report we published just last year, looking at the future-ready university, considering the post-pandemic world and the changes that are going to come to this sort of vital sector. A quick bit of context on us. We're a company of engineers, architects who work around the world. We're made up of acousticians, consultants in economics, sustainability, all kinds of different aspects. We have 89 offices with across 33 different countries. Originally, one of our largest office in London, but most recently we opened a new office in Lima, Peru, for example. Been going for 75 years, and we've got over 15,000 people working with us. And we're one of the largest employee-owned organisations in the world. We're held in trust, no shareholders. We do the work we want for ourselves and our clients to build a better world. Myself, in particular, I'm from part of Arup, actually called Arup University. Our skills and training, R&D, innovation part. Arup University kind of acts as that internal intelligence centre. We work with knowledge management and make sure that all of the learning in the work that we do broadly gets captured and shared across the practice and can be applied so we can do smarter and better projects, improve the communities that we serve. Foresight itself, we collaborate with clients and our colleagues to help understand the trends and the kind of news that are going to identify and define the future markets that we're going to be serving. We self-fund a lot of our own research and foresight studies, so we remain, a trusted advisor to those we work with. But get to the research, which is what you're interested in. We worked with our clients as well as the engineers and architects that work on our education projects. We went to interviews to actually discuss with them what kind of challenges they've been facing, and these were both academics and also maybe primarily estate managers and property managers who have ownership over the actual physical campus. And we took these insights and synthesized them into a findings report to be able to point to the key areas of interest that deserve our attention over the coming years. And this is a list of the universities that we spoke to, just so you can see the breadth and the global reach that we achieved with this. I want to acknowledge that we failed to interview any universities in South America and only one on the continent of Africa, but we hope our findings do have global relevance, understanding, whilst understanding that obviously contexts vary in different places. So those key findings, those key factors, what were they? For today's presentation, I've got 6 here for you, and I'll talk to them in a bit more detail. But first and foremost, unsurprisingly, hybrid teaching, recognizing this massive acceleration. It was happening in different ways beforehand, but it's now the standard of having that hybrid digital and physical teaching environment. Net zero, this is the key factor for environmental benefit. How universities can achieve that is a real challenge. Resilience and its wider implications beyond the pandemic. We've all had to be incredibly resilient, but there's much more to it than that. Commercial pressures are never far away. Operations need to be kind of doing more with less. And the physical campus remains foundational, but it needs to be adaptive. So those points in a bit more detail for you. That idea of hybrid teaching, that mix of digital and in-person teaching, people told us was definitely becoming the norm. Investment in digital technology is going to be needed to actually facilitate that in a proper way, make it smoother. There's so much that we lose from doing in virtual interactions using Teams and Zoom and all of that. You can't see all of my body language. There are so many visual cues, and it adds a level of friction that we need to be really cognizant of. Now, due to that, students expect universities to still offer face-to-face interaction. And then one interesting thing we found is issues of intellectual property and equity of access is really important. If a lecturer has now recorded his entire program, does the university own that? Can he take that to his next teaching place? These are all big challenges that need to be kind of considered. And finally, it's important to acknowledge that hybrid learning has had an immense impact on accessibility more broadly. There are some communities that have seen accessibility increase and others who've been finding it really challenging. Zero, as I said, is kind of the way that universities see themselves as being able to have an agenda to address the climate crisis. And institutions need to minimize the amount of new construction they do. And what's really interesting actually is that students are the ones that are really pushing for this. I have to give a shout out to the Higher Education Design Quality Forums, a fantastic report they did last year, which they asked 1,000 plus students what they were thinking around sustainability on their campuses. And we've got to recognise that students today, this is Greta Thunberg's generation who are arriving on campus, and after the school strike for climate movement, they know what needs to be done. They know it's not plastic straws and paper bags, it's institutional change that's needed, and they're looking to their universities to divest from carbon and to implement actual strategies on campus so that they have the tools in place to be sustainable whilst being students. Now, resilience. Universities, I think, could benefit from considering more about scenario planning, and we've just been through one big scenario of the pandemic that many academics and leaders spoke about. Now we know what we got right and what we got wrong. Beyond this, there remains conflict and economic disruption, cybersecurity, before we even think about the impacts of climate change and what that might bring. Universities need to think about adopting new business models and understanding how they're actually going to be able to respond once again to disruptions that will come, no doubt, in the future. Now, commercial pressures. University finances really have been hit for many during the pandemic, and the lack of movement in people globally, recognizing how migrating to study is really important for many, many people. International student bodies make up the vitality of a university. They also, particularly as the UK context, they make up a big part of the budgets for universities as well. Universities need to think about partners and how they can work with the state to gain better funding and things like that, and think about new business models, ways they can utilize their technology, their insights, their skills, and the invention that is inherent in universities. While some universities have enormous endowments, the vast majority still need to balance the books, and they're a commercial enterprise. So how they go about that whilst remaining key to their mission is key. Now, campus operations, particularly thinking of the estate managers that we spoke to. One of the interesting things we found is that the pandemic meant there was a much broader amount of data that universities were capturing about how their buildings were maintained and used and accessed. Now, even though many of those restrictions may be gone for many of us, we still have those sensors and those frameworks of data that we can use to better understand how to use the spaces that universities have. Also, with those universities, there's an increased desire to think about not just the physical benefits and positivity within the actual spaces, but broader mental well-being things that can come with that, right through from thinking about lighting and fresh air and all kinds of aspects like that. And then recognizing that universities need to be providing space not just for learning, but for socialization, particularly given how important we think, how important we recognize that is after the past 2 years. But as I said earlier on, it's a terrible oxymoron, doing more with less, but it's a challenge that many universities have come to us with, and to do that requires a lot of adaptability and a lot of increased efficiency. Finally, physical campus. So we see the physical campus really remaining key and foundational to universities. No one is taking the past 2 years and thinking, we want more of that. More teams, but better, smoother. Everyone is screaming to get back into the classroom and get into that face-to-face interaction and benefit from all of that. That's not to say there aren't still great things to take from it, and universities are going to be looking for innovative ways to have mixed-use spaces and utilize what they have, not just for the normal face-to-face teaching, but do more with that. With the hybrid learning, maybe a course is not limited by the number of seats in a lecture theatre, but there's more to it than that in terms of what spaces for the seminar afterwards can you create to bring more people in. And to actually do that, it's a lot of it's about adaptability, being able to design buildings so that They can serve us now, but serve us into the future. When we build something, we want it to be around for 100 years or more. That's even more important when we think about climate and net zero. There's nothing worse than demolishing a building and starting again, and all of the embodied carbon that's lost with that. So there are smart ways of doing that, primarily with being flexible and thinking about smart ways to design. So those are the key characteristics that we kind of identified. Our report is available online for anybody to read, and we welcome feedback about what we've sort of discussed and seen. I'm looking forward to discussing it with the rest of the group as well. There was one last thing I wanted to kind of point to, because I know a lot of these conversations we talk about the future of our buildings and universities in particular. We're looking for frameworks to understand ways to think about these things. We find the UN sustainability goals really, really important and really useful to frame our thinking. I just wanted to point to a few that I think are relevant to the discussion. Obviously, SDG 4, quality education, is all about universities, but there's three others which I think are also equally important and give a place to universities to really have a fantastic influence. So number 9, thinking of industry, innovation and infrastructure. Universities kind of have so much knowledge and they're all sort of foundational to our innovation economies, but they can do more with that and kind of think about co-location and further collaboration that can be engendered by the spaces that we design and the spaces that universities provide. SDG 10, reduce inequalities. When we think about endemic poverty, education is second only to gender equality in being the key factor that allows one generation to grow and do better than the previous one, to find better opportunities and increase their income. And then 11, cities, sustainable cities and communities. Universities define their communities, and how they sit in their city, how they sit in their location, how they work with the broader community is really important. But I'm not going to talk too much on that one because I believe the next speaker is going to be talking on that, and I'm really keen to hear from them. So I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, and looking forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you, dear Tristan. Thank you for those interesting insights. It's also worth seeing that you pay such attention to the SDGs. And as you said, our next speaker will also talk about the role of university in cities. And we're excited to listen to you later in our panel discussion. Now, how can educational buildings accommodate to future learning forms? How do they evolve in time, and what role do they play in cities? Our next guest will answer those questions. She believes that the new era of learning spaces requires new answers and solutions. And currently, she's working at EHA Architects, where she designs happy and healthy environment. We're very excited to listen to your talk. Welcome, Pascaline. How are you?
Thank you very much, Camilla, for inviting me. I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm glad to be in the audience to be at your at this evening's event. Okay, shall I share my screen?
Please, yes.
See how it works. Okay. Does it work at the moment?
We see your camera, but not your presentation.
No. Oh, that's let me check. I started on the share screen button, of course, and then I annulate, then I retry again. because it seems to be a rather...
I think that happens every time with new tools.
Okay.
Let's see if it works then.
Yeah. Share screen. And then Venster, PowerPoint, share.
I can tell meanwhile where
Yeah.
we're having watchers from. We have a lot actually. We have from the UK, from the Netherlands, Germany, from Munich, and also from Gummersbach, that's near to Cologne. Also people from Russia, UK, and a very, very, very special guest from Notopia.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there is a thing, please update system permissions to allow screen recording. So at the moment, I can't.
Do we have your presentation? Maybe we can share it for you.
Then I should send it, of course.
Yes, please send it.
Yes, I will send it right away. Yes? Okay. And then I had already a link ready to send.
Perfect. Meanwhile, we
Yeah,
want to know
super.
about our audience a little bit more details. So, where did you like to study the most? Do you like to study in cafes, or do you enjoy studying outside under the sun? You can leave us comments, and then we'll share with you what all of us like to, all the spaces we like to study in.
Hey, send it to Igor. So Igor, let's see whether you received my presentation. And of course, I will try once more. Unable to share. It still mentions.
Okay, I will now share it.
Super. Thank you so much.
We see here that a lot of people enjoy studying cafes.
Sorry.
Okay, great. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Apologies for this technical issue. As mentioned, I'm definitely glad to join this conference, and quite sad, like I think all of us are, about the situation back in Ukraine and Russia. So I wish everyone, I don't know what to say. Let's start the presentation. Sorry, can you please go to the first slide again? Yeah. Maybe you can put it on full screen. Is that possible? Or is that, yeah. Okay, yes. Okay, so please then to the next slide. My name is Pascal Leijstra, and I'm working already for over 20 years on educational spaces. And those are from kindergartens, from primary schools, secondary schools, university buildings, and actually not only in the Netherlands, in Holland, but also abroad. Yes, please, the next slide. Three main topics I would like to discuss. Education changed, of course. I would like to talk a little bit about the history of the campus of TU Delft. It's dated back from 1842 until now, and all the changes which were and brought it. And I would like to address to modern education in historical buildings. Yes, please, the next. These photos, they seem very, very outdated. And of course, yes, they are. But in a way, they are only maybe 100 years old. And as you can see on the left and both on the right, teaching was for quite some time it was one-directed. You had a teacher, a professor, and the students, they were if everything was okay, listening very silently, and there was not a lot of dialogue, communication. So this remained for quite some time. Even in when I went to school, it was not really different from the image to the left. And okay, I must say university was a bit different than the picture on the right, but it was more or less the same. But then, yes, please, the next picture. Yeah. So the way of learning is changing, as also our former speaker Tristan already mentioned, but actually there are things even more changing, and those ones are the changes in the world. So how can education adapt to these very fast, unpredictable changes of the world? We're talking about the pandemic, about the recent situation, about sustainability. I do have a very nice TED talk I saw from Obeng Smart, and he's talking about the world after midnight. It's really a recommendation. Yes, please. So what do we need to learn? Actually, it's all about 21st century skills. And it's not only learning from the books, it's about critical thinking, it's about communication, making social spaces, it's about collaboration, working peer-to-peer, it's about creativity. It's not one direction, and there are all kinds of ways how we can try to explore these skills best as possible. Agile way of working, personalized way of working, blended learning, peer-to-peer. We have Scrum methods, we have MOOC, we have all kinds of sources. Yes, please. Next. Okay, so all these different ways of educational learning methods, how should a building adapt to these ones? Yes, please. In a way, that would be great. No, only having this blended learning with your device. But as Tristan already mentioned, after these 2 years of pandemic, everybody is longing to go back to the campus again. So this is one way, new way of learning, but let's go to the campus, to the physical spaces. And what does a building, an educational building, ask? Well, it definitely asks a diversity of spaces. And if we start from the bottom, we need spaces where you can be concentrated, where you can learn on high individual methods. I call the second way of learning water holes. Actually, those are the places for co-working. And then the third one, I call them the fireplaces, where you gather all together, where you come together. And those are actually the social spaces. Yes, please. So from this about 100 years ago classroom, there is this great example reference in Copenhagen. It's even a school without classrooms. So in this school on your right, it's from 3KN Architects. There are no classrooms, but there are all these different kinds of spaces, like these water holes, campfires, and caves. Yes, please. And the traditional lecture hall, there is a beautiful example in Delft Technical University. It's in the Pulse building, and you see that it's not at all this static way of environment, but it has become a highly dynamic environment. Yes, please. Okay, the second issue, the second topic. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Technical University of Delft, where I studied myself. Yes, please. I need to hurry up a little, but okay. Delft, it's a really small city. It has about 100,000 people, and 1/4 of them is students. Yes, please. Next. If I compare it to Munich, that's a bit different, as I read. It's 1.5 million citizens and about 100,000 students, sorry. Yes, please. The technical university dated in 1842, and it started in this building. Yes, please. So it was in the historical city center. You see the star, that's where it all started. And then in the 20s became the first extension of the campus. And in the 60s became an extra new extension. And then recently it's still extending, this technical university of Delft. Yes, please. This is an example of the building of an extension in the 1920s, and you see a quite formal building, probably with a lot of small classrooms, offices. You see big courtyards to get daylight in. Yes, please. If I go back to the 60s, and this looks already again very old dated, but they made a really big extension of the campus, and they built all kind of separate buildings, as you can see them, each having its own department with a long lane for cars. And actually the beautiful building on the left was the Aula of the TU Delft from Broek en Bakema, the UFO building. Okay, thank you. When I came in Delft in the 90s, it was no longer attractive. It was stony, there were too many cars, so they had to make a plan. Yes, please. They made a plan for a living campus. Okay, yes, please. And how did they do it? One of the first thing which was done in the late 90s was to make it a green campus. Yes, please. Actually, they added also a lot of social spaces. You know, of course, in Holland, and I think everywhere in Europe by now, bikes are very popular. But not only a storage for bikes has been made, but a coffee social point has been added. And you can see what happened. Yes, please. And it's not only the students who, and of course the staff who is at the campus, but a lot of companies, businesses are attending nowadays and have also their own spaces at the campus. Yes, please. And what I think is a really nice experience is to visit once the Science Center in Delft. It's students make all kind of these fancy, futuristic, how shall I say, cars, bikes, and other things. And visitors of citizens of Delft, children who attend workshops in this science center. Yes, please. And one thing what I thought is really a big deal is that not every university is working for its own, but lately the three universities of three different cities in Holland, Leiden, Delft and Rotterdam, are co-working. And actually they're forming, as I read in online, it's one of the largest medical hubs of Europe. Yes, please. Okay, then very briefly, I tell you that future learning spaces not necessarily need modern buildings. What happened in 2008 was the Faculty of Architecture burned down, and it was really a black day in a lot of lives of architects who has been there. Yeah. As you can see, no renovation possible. Actually, the cause was a coffee machine. Okay, what to do? Then a team of architects came in May 2008. They thought, okay, we're gonna transform this building temporary into the new architectural faculty. But of course, what they saw, two little classrooms, two small rooms, no places for model rooms, no lecture spaces, no social spaces, a bad interior. But, yes, please. They had two splendid ideas. They made you don't see my course, they made two courtyards to get daylight in. They covered them. And one other thing is that they made a very much better wayfinding. Yes, please. This is a part of the wayfinding which was not imaginable before. Yes, please. And then the two main inventions were the covering of the courtyards. And in this case, you see the model workshop spaces. It's really a delightful place to work. Yes, please. And the other one is the lecture room by NVADV Architects, and also this one, it's a multifunctional super space to be. I would say come and look and join a lecture or anything over here. Yes, please. So my statement is we don't need necessarily new buildings, modern buildings, but also existing buildings can be perfectly transformed into spaces for future learning. Yes, please. And here you see some advantages about the renovation. Yes, please. Okay, my final slide. I think also, as Tristan already mentioned, the build and building sector is responsible for almost 40% of total global CO2 emissions, carbon emissions. If we want to be completely CO2 neutral by 2050, we have to change course. And I think that's very important to have that one in mind. Thank you very much.
Go to thank you, dear Pascale, for your project. It looks amazing. I personally want to study at the TU Delft to be in those buildings, really. And also super interesting that you all really focus also on the responsibility of universities in achieving net zero. And I want to return to my first question from the other round. We will see the comments because you said we need diverse spaces for learning. And we can see here in the chat that people actually want different spaces to learn in. For example, one viewer said we want public uni learning spaces because they have the perfect combination of learning atmosphere and social interaction. We have people that say they want to learn at home. There are also others that say they want to learn in on their own couch, but also outside under a tree. So it's really amazing to see that you've achieved that at TU Delft. We'll be glad to listen to more later in the panel discussion, but thank you very much for those amazing insights.
Thank you.
Now, I will present you two speakers. They're both students from the Technical University of Munich. Their names are Elizabeth Duro and Hannah Thomas. They're both leads of the student initiative called A Plant a Seed. And they will talk about how this initiative is turning TUM's main yard into an urban garden. Hi. Hi, girls. How are you?
Hi, doing good.
Well, thank you for being here. And we're very excited to learn more about Plant a Seed. You can try
Thank you so
sharing
much.
your screen.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Great. So as Camila just introduced, Hannah and me are from the project Plant a Seed, which is happening on the TU Munich main campus in the city. And we want to talk about sustainable food production in the city today. So when we were establishing our project, we were thinking about why should we do an urban gardening project on our campus in the first place. So one of the first things that come into mind is, of course, sustainable living in an urban campus. So maybe some of you have been to Munich already and have had a look at the city center and also the region where the TU Munich is situated. And we have a very urban space here. And we thought it might be great to add some more green areas also for the comfort of the students. On the other side, of course, we wanted to provide a link between theory and practice. So in different courses and from different backgrounds, the people participating in Plant a Seed were learning about sustainable concepts and theories, but we actually wanted to implement it on the campus to make everyone see how it can be done. And the last point, of course, is also sustainable education. So by providing an urban garden on the campus, we can actually educate other students and also the staff of the university on how to have a more sustainable campus and how to learn more about sustainability itself. So what is Plant a Seed actually about? So in our project, we want to aim to realize the potential of sustainability concepts and of course integrate them into the urban environment. And we want to do this by providing an interactive learning opportunity for students and inspiring creative implementation ideas. And our vision, so the idea for the future, is to develop more solutions for a more sustainable future worldwide, and also raising awareness for the interconnectedness between people, nature, and the climate. So let me first tell you about our story and how the urban garden at TU Munich came into place. So the first step, of course, was planning the urban garden. So you see some of the raised beds that we were planning here. So we have our own team for that, thinking about different designs, also incorporating places where you can sit and study, talk to friends, have a lunch break, to have a living surrounding on the campus as well. Then the next step was, of course, actually building the raised beds. This was one of the first days where we had an actual meeting with all the people from Plant a Seed in person again after a long COVID winter. And we definitely had a big bonding time and a lot of fun on that day, which is very important for such a project. And we were able to build 13 raised beds. You can see one of them on the picture here on our campus. So the next step, of course, was in late May, planting our crops. So here you can see the different crops that we were putting into the beds, carefully thinking about which plants actually match each other and how to care for them later on. So of course, the longest part is the bed tending, actually. So we have to look for pests and how the plants are doing. Look if they need some support, like the beans you can see on the picture here. And of course, watering through the hot, long summer in an urban space as well. But after that, the big reward was coming. So we had our first harvest with a lot of herbs, salads, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and much more. And with that harvest that you can see on the picture here, of course, the social idea also comes into place. We were trying to make good food out of all the harvest that we were having and having a good time cooking the food together, which is just another experience when you actually grow the food yourself and then you can taste it in the end as well. So the last part of our first year was the workshop season. So in the fall, when we here in Germany have some colder days and it's not so easy to plant a lot of more crops, we were doing workshops so that we can give like the lessons that we have learned to other students, but also the staff of our university. And here you can see a group of students who were learning which plants you can actually put together in one raised bed and learning about the different pests and problems that you have when you care for the plants as well. So now you might think that's actually quite a nice story, and of course it's a good time for students coming together and planting things, but what is the value that Plant a Seed as a project is actually adding to the campus? So one main thing is, of course, for us greening the campus, especially in an urban environment where we have a lot of concrete, and we just wanted to put more green spaces into our surroundings, to have more comfortable spaces for lunch breaks and learning with other students. Then another value is also producing crops in a limited urban space, which is of course a big topic for the future as well, and providing desperately needed space for insects in an urban environment. And those values we were actually providing also through research. So we did different modules at the university and had bachelor thesis and master thesis, to have more research on what values we are adding to our own campus. And of course, the student engagement, with a lot of students coming together, learning together, developing projects together. And in the end, the multidisciplinarity, because we are all from different backgrounds from the university, and we believe that we need a lot of different backgrounds and study fields to come to an actual sustainable solution in the end. And now Hannah will tell you a little bit more about our structure and the teams of Plant a Seed.
Thank you. Plant a Seed is broken up into about 10 different teams. We have management groups, which oversee the finances, HR and PR, and we have hands-on teams, working teams that deal with the beds, building the beds, creating infrastructure for smart irrigation and for vertical farming. So these are some of our working groups. Crop management are very active with the beds. We have about maybe 15 active members there right now. Irrigation has about 5. They deal a lot with programming and Arduino and Raspberry Pi, and they're trying to work in tandem with crop management to add a little bit more technology to our garden and make it easier to water things and make sure that our plants are nice and healthy. And raised bed design works on creating flattering structures that you can enjoy the gardens with on campus or off campus on other potential sites. Our finance team helps us get sponsors, funding, and they help us keep on track with our spending. It's quite a small team. They're very efficient. Public relations deals with our Instagram channel, website, and other social media platforms. And impact management creates surveys and helps form these workshops that help bring people in from within and without of TUM for learning more about how to create your own garden at home or anything related to nature and connectivity with city life. Our research team is still trying to get going. We have a lot of open working on connecting with student boards and creating programs there. Team management works on making team building events, welcoming new members and making sure they find a place in their team and know how to navigate through Plant a Seed. And vertical farming is trying to establish a base where we can grow food year-round, also in the winter. We've also expanded to Mexico. This is more of a sister project at this point, since there's only limited amounts of hands-on activity that we can do from here. But that's part of our goal as Plant a Seed to expand to other parts of the world. And And so, yeah, going forward, we would like to really start implementing this vertical indoor farming, specifically in Weinstefan, but also in other locations. This will enable us to get a greater yield throughout the year and have more controlled growing conditions. And a network for urban gardening has already started in Mexico, but we are looking to implement these practices in other cities across Germany and internationally. And we need help. So if you're interested in working either hands-on or remotely, we are a very ambitious team, and we're very passionate and excited about what we're doing. It's a lot of fun. So if you feel like you'd be interested in helping out regularly or irregularly, please reach out to either one of us and we will help you get started.
Well, thank you, girls. I think you should leave your comment there in case someone wants to contact you to get involved in some way with Plant a Seed. I know personally how many people are working on this project, and I know that it has grown a lot in the last year. So congratulations for that, and we hope to see you later in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next guest is also from Inside the Tomb, and will also address the topic sustainability. Matthias Faur, he's a researcher at the Professorship for Urban Design at TU München, and will tell us how universities will and can help fighting climate change. Thank you. Hello, Matthias. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. We're very glad to listen to your talk today.
Yes, I will give my best.
Perfect.
Can you already see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Also in full screen?
In full screen, yes.
Yes, perfect. So, the question of our studio was how we can rethink the future of our campus in the city center concerning the climate change and other crises of the future. Rethinking the future starts now. It starts with us. That's why I want to thank those 17 students that made this semester possible. They are the future. They will change it. So no matter what they created over the semester, there will be change because they changed the way they think. This process of rethinking took part in a digital way, like because of COVID, but also in an analog way on site, where we got to know this place and study it. And also, like already heard, in a hybrid format where we could combine the benefits of being on site with also the benefits of a digital usage of teaching. So at first, the task was to find a solution or to make the city center campus of TU München strong for the future. We realized that it's not only the campus center in the middle of Munich, that TUM is even more. It has departments in Garching, Freising, and all over Bavaria. So if anybody of you ever has been to Munich, I will give you a quick view where it is. So this is the railroad station, this is the Old Town Englischer Garden, and here are the museums, and direct there's the city campus. It's a really heterogene site, like our students are, and most of those buildings were built by professors of architecture at the department over the years, over 200 years. That's why all of those buildings have different names and different looks. But okay, if you walk through it, if you walk there on the street, you realize, okay, this should be one of the greatest universities in the world, but it looks like this. closed walls, closed windows, fences, borders, parking cars. And the first thing we thought, or the students thought, was, where are the people? Why don't take the people advantage of their university, of their city, of their building? That's why the students and we as a team decided we have to make bigger plans. We have to make an action plan, what will happen over the next 10 years with this campus. And we have to go in AGs, Arbeitsgemeinschaft. That's kind of a working group, but more in a community way. Like the students, they have this bigger picture they want to create. Then they split up in AGs where they get into it more, and then they go on site and they go into their team, and then they challenge what's really got to be done on site. And those students come up with many things. They question everything. They have visions for the place. They see stuff. They realize things like how difficult it is to work with all the people that are involved in such processes, and they start to use their own power. So like I said, those 17 students start to talk to each other, and they split up into 4 Arbeitsgemeinschaften, and then again into 8 teams. And they divide the whole campus of the city center into 8 pieces. So everybody can work on this divided piece in the group. And so the first thing, or one of the important things, is to really know your space, know the place you're working on, know every piece and bit of it, and also use your space. Like here you can see we made a circle talk in the hallway. We used the garden, the green side, and we just were there, looked at it, used it in another way that other people do it. And then the next thing is talk to each other. Students need to talk. Students need to meet and think about problems and find solutions on their own. And it's so important that students over a semester not only work on their own or in this tiny little group of 2 people, they have to talk in all of the group. And then the next thing we decided is we want to adapt space. We really took it on us. Yeah, we decided that we use this staircase, that we use this hallway, and the students found out there is so much waste all over the campus. So they built all their models all over the semester by recycling materials. Like, for example, here by broken glass they found on campus, or here medicine packages, or an old yoga mat. And the next important thing is really present your work on site. Present it to the people that work there. Present it to people that live there. And here you can see what the students came up with. That's the big master plan. That's what they as a group decided would be the best thing to do with the TUM campus in the city center for the next 10 years. And to make it more understandable for people that are not used to architecture or used to the place, they gave their 10 ideas or bigger tasks they want to reach 10 song names. So for example, everybody knows We Are Family or The Circle of Life. And those things, they really help communicate ideas and communicate interests. So the 4 AGs, Arbeitsgemeinschaften, free space, where they, for example, invented a concept for lighting so that the lights go down at night and animals can find more space, or mobility. And both are divided into short-term goals, so what you can change really quickly. For example, like we heard, plant a seed, put up some birdhouses, or put up some places where you can plant something. And in mobility, for example, just change a parking spot into a bicycle place. But on the other hand, the bigger goals they want to reach is just make whole streets car free, or get another subway station so you can get to Garching, to the outsider campus of the city, just by train really quickly, and you don't have to change. And there are also like soft tasks, and we call those things like the AG of meeting and resource. Like, how do we use electricity? How do we use water? How do we use waste? How much is thrown away? Or with meeting, it's more about how we can't build a place where we say, okay, this is where people meet, but we can start communities and we can spread ideas, and this will help to make the campus a more livable place for the future. And now we'll go quickly through the projects of the students. For example, Johanna and Bilal, they made a video and analyzed the entrance of TUM, and then realized, okay, we have to give this building an address. So they made a big roof out of solar panels that will power the electricity, and green walls to show the urban jungle. Or Anna and Luisa, they found a lot of closed doors in their building, and they opened up all those doors and said, we want people to come inside. We opened the whole ground floor and everybody can enter, and it will be a communicational place. Or Natalia and Jesse, they found out that the Mensa is only used 3 hours a day. So they made new concepts that students can work while they are eating. Like we heard in the comments, somebody wants to drink a cup of coffee and work, so why can't they work in the Mensa? And also there, they recycled their model by using old food that was thrown away. And Elena and Julia, they created a connection between inner use of buildings and outer space. For example, the musicians now in their plannings, they make their music on the roof so you can hear it over the city. And in the park, in the garden, there's an auditorium where you can have a speech, or where you can invite people from outside the university to listen to it, to inform people, to spread ideas. And Magdalena, Matthias, and Johannes had to face the problem that the department that is placed in their buildings will be sent to Garching this summer. And so all these 3 buildings, they will be empty. And we have to find a solution, because we can't leave buildings empty in the city center of Munich, especially when they are under monument protection. And so we have to question also, what is monument protection and what will be our goal for the future? Do we want to protect all buildings, or do we want to have a livable city that is possible to give space to students in the future? And Lukas and Mina, they made a video where they also challenged the people that are walking the streets and said to them, okay, here are all the borders. We cut down all the borders in this area, and what will happen? What will change? How will people adapt those spaces? And Levin and Valentin, they not even built their models out of thrown away stuff. They also made their plans out of thrown away stuff and said, okay, in the future, we have to do recycling. We can't rebuild everything new. We have to make a place at the university where we can put all our not used stuff from university and from students, recycle it, reuse it, and don't throw away so much stuff. And Fabia and Simon, they had a material testing laboratory, and they turned it from material testing into green facade testing laboratory. So as you can see, all those things, they tackle in kind of a way the climate change, but not only. We have to adapt every place we find for the future, and we have to rethink those places. And we not only have to rethink those places, but also rethink ourselves and how we see our environment. And that's like the next step we are going to take. In summer, we will block a whole street, and all of our students will be there, and they will present all the stuff they've created and all the things, all those ideas, like we once did 1 year ago, also in the street in Munich. And it's really nice to see that people are interested and people want to know this and people want to see this and people want to talk about it. And also students, they want to bring it to life. They want to not only draw their ideas on paper, they want to really put them out in the city. And that's what we really want them to do. We have a bachelor thesis that's called Interventionsklasse. And there we really work hard for 3-4 months just to do it on one day, change a supermarket into an art exhibition, make a place that is not friendly into a place where people can meet and communicate. And we just realized that you have to do it. Just do it. Just go out there, make your city your own, and change it. Don't wait until anybody else does it. Do it on your own. You are the future. Use your powers, use your voice. Question everything. Don't just draw what others tell you to do. And see the whole picture. Do not be fooled and look outside the frame. Together, we will build a new future, and we will transform cities by ideas and not by destroying bombs. Think free and be open-minded and stop this war.
Well, Matthias, thank you very much. I think your talk was super inspiring, really. First of all, I hope that the ideas of your study project become a reality. Also, thank you for showing us that campuses can also happen outside. They can also happen on the street. And I think now is the time for our first panel discussion. So we'll bring back all the panelists we had before. You can also use this opportunity in the chat to ask Matthias, Pascale, Tristan, Hannah, and Lisa all the questions that you have about future of university spaces. Great. So our first question is for Tristan. During the corona pandemic, students missed the social interactions at campus. In what way do you think universities administration should address this issue? You
Okay.
can tell it
So
from your experience with a lot of universities.
yeah, I think in the past, a lot of universities sold themselves on the quality of the education, the academic outputs, the teaching staff. And I think what we're seeing is more and more universities prioritizing their public realm and their social spaces. Here in London, the London School of Economics has just opened one of its new buildings that, as I understand it, originally was planned primarily as an academic building with academic teaching spaces, but it also has a sports hall in the basement, and every single space that's in there is every sort of movement space, every communal space is designed with the idea of interaction being ingrained, be that the passing of student and lecturer on the staircase, or just breakout spaces for teaching and for learning and interaction. It's becoming more and more important, and as I say, the students are looking at it, because university isn't just about learning, it's about discovering yourself, having that social time of interaction, making those lifelong friends, and sort of learning who you are. So we're seeing, progressing universities and more, they have to compete on this. They can't just rest on their history, but actually think about how they're going to become more and more social spaces beyond just teaching.
Thank you. I think, Pascal, that could be also a question for you. How do you see, how can universities focus on making students, but also teachers, happier? How can we focus on different skills also?
Actually, I must already stand with Igor. I saw in this chat box. In the 90s, okay, back to these days, we had coffee in a hallway in this university building, which has been burned down. The coffee machine in the hallway, and it was really bad coffee. Nowadays, there is this espresso machine, and actually, I'm teaching also at a technical university in Delft. And first thing I do is get some lovely cappuccino, and so I think offering good food, good coffee is already one starting point to make people feel at ease and hopefully open to get to talk to other people, teachers, professors. So good coffee might be one of the first steps. Yeah.
I would like to say something.
Yes, of
I'm
course.
totally with you both. I'm also thinking the social interaction at campus is the most important thing for all of the students. And I think that the quality of the coffee is not the important thing. Like you said, you were drinking not good coffee, but it was a starting point. And that's
Yeah.
what I really want all of our students to rethink and to start, that it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done in any kind of way. Like, for example, our students in last winter, they got on eBay an old machine to put in cold drinks. And so they bought cold drinks every week, and they just gave them away for 15 cents for everybody who wanted. And it was the community point in all of the campus, just because it was there, not because it was expensive or great. No, because it was there.
Of course, Matthias, sorry that I interrupt. You are right. It's not about the best coffee. Actually, I forgot one thing to mention. The building being made temporary, transformed temporary for the architectural faculty. Initially it was supposed to be temporary, but everybody started to love it, and nobody now can ever think, oh, we do not want to leave this place, because it's so, yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not about new, and it's about this different, this magic touch of you come, please come and see for yourself whether you agree.
Yeah, but I think it also takes one person or two persons that are not afraid to change. And if those really are there and those start, like there's another question in the chat where, like it said, how did the university administration translate the ideas into action? They didn't. They don't want to. You know, those people are really, they have to stay strict to their rules. They have to do what they are told from above and what's told to them for many years. But you as students, you are free. You can do whatever you want. And you have to do it now, because that's also something. If we now start to change things in university, when you are finished with studying, then it will maybe change. You know, you only study for 5 years maybe, but changes in university, they will take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So we are talking today about problems we can start, but we will not completely feel.
Unmute me.
And that's really something I'm really proud of Lisa and Hannah, that they just said, okay, we start plant a seed, and we do this. And every time I walk over campus, I see their plants standing there, and I say, yeah, okay, they just did it. And
Exactly.
that's what I want from other students more.
Completely. Yes, I can totally agree. And I would actually like to ask Lisa and Hannah, um, what can you tell other students to who also want to get engaged into shaping their campuses? Do you think there's something special, or what should they do to get involved?
I think that really fits to what we were just discussing. So on the one point, of course, just doing something. Because when we were thinking about building the first race beds on the campus, which was like 1.5 years ago, it was like a utopia for us. We never thought it would happen in such a short time. And although some people might say, oh, well, 10 race beds on the campus, that's not that big of a change. Like Mr. Fall was just saying, it is a big change for most of the universities. And I think the best thing is to actually find people, find like-minded students who want to change something with you and connect with all the people at your university. Because especially at big universities like the TU Munich, there are so many different people who want the same change at the universities, and you can actually do a lot with such a big group. And I think that's really important. Maybe Hannah has something to add as well.
Yeah, sorry, screen is first. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, there's actually a lot of interest from students. So I think that's why we have expanded so much into different teams and not just having, a crop management team, which is what you would usually think about as being a garden, but there's so much interest from so many different directions. There's so much potential that we need to organize ourselves in a lot of different ways, which makes it a much more complex and interesting project. And in that way, people from all different abilities, if you're there in person or if you are in another country, even, you can help online. And I think that's also what our teams are trying to do, is just get the word out there, PR team, that this opportunity is available and everyone is welcome to join.
Well, thank you very much. It's actually something also that Tristan said. Students have the power to act. In which way did you have with the report also the opportunity to tell the administrations they can change something? Because as Transforming Periphery says, we have to scale to the administration to fulfill our ambitions goals. Do you have any kind of experience in that sense, Tristan?
Ooh, I'm a great advocate of just getting out of the way. And quite often when you have people and when you have students who have the energy and the ideas, it's fantastic seeing in Matthew's presentation there the kind of invention of the students and also their advocacy through utilising recycled materials, for example, so on and so forth. It is really having the confidence almost to get out of the way and let the innovators and let the kind of really creative parts of whatever institution you're in, give them the freedom to experiment and play and do that. And then when things do land and when things do work, celebrating that success, endorsing it, and then building on it, because the viewer is entirely right. And here's kind of a question I'd also have for the panel, is that question of scale. So when you do face conflict, what tools do we have available to us? Or is that where innovation is needed to be able to have a seat at the table? For the fantastic project that students have done, there's an estate manager, there's no doubt a TUM sustainability manager, and their agenda is, tools are going to be completely different, their scale's going to be different, and yeah, being able to bring those together and work collaboratively is the big challenge.
I always have the feeling for the administration and for the people that are really have power, it's often about an idea or about a vision. Like the counselor of TU Munich, he doesn't know what that means, what we talk about. Like there was also the question, like, is this only architects or also other students? I think we as architects, we have to visualize the vision. And then with this vision, we got something we can sell to the counselor. And then the counselor will use it for his power and will use this to show, look how good we are. And I really think that in the future, it will be important if you want to be high in those rankings for best university or best sustainable, you need to be sustainable in the future. Like you showed in your speech. Universities, they also want to be proud of what they are and proud of what they represent. So if you as students give them something they can be proud of, they will support you. And like at the moment, there's a big parking spot for the counselor at the main entrance, and there's like one time in the year there is his car really, and the rest of the year it is just empty, but it is there because he has the power to have it. But if we show him you can have something other cool there, maybe he will change it. But we have to come up with these ideas because he got so much other stuff to do, he won't have time to do that. And like I said, we have to really talk to other fields, like Lisa, for example. She's not an architect, but we have to find partners that know stuff in the areas we want to change things, and they need to help us. And we can visualize what they can think of. Like, for example, mathematics or physics, or I don't know.
Exactly.
There are so many different departments at the TU Munich, and we don't use them, or we don't combine them. And it's not only in the Department of Architecture that we don't talk to each other, but also at the whole TUM. For example, there's a studying class for brewing beer. And why don't we meet those people, and why don't we start a beer garden near the Mensa where students can drink beer for 15 cents? I don't know. Why don't we do that?
You're right, Matthias. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that was actually the perfect wrap up for this blog. I hope your message reaches later more people, also people who are on higher ranges. So thank you very much, dear speakers. Sorry for interrupting you, Matthias. We really appreciate all your talks and are glad that you came here today to share with us our cool projects and also the ideas that have to be heard also from more people, not only for architectures. I'm also not an architect, but I really think our spaces have to be used differently if we want to create future learning, if we want to make happy places for students and teachers later. So thank you very much. Now we're coming to our next big topic. It's called Eduverse, which stands for Educational Metaverse. And I want to present you your moderator for this blog. His name is Ione Hack. Hi, Ione, how are you?
I'm good, excited. And it's super interesting what we heard already about the physical environment, and me being an architect myself. I think there's really a lot to learn, especially what we've heard or learned in the past 2 years, and now probably moving forward, adapting, changing our physical environments. And I think now we're going to take a look how that probably can also be translated or needs to be translated into the digital realm, and probably how they can reinforce themselves.
We're very happy to have you here today with us, Ione. We can start if you want to with the second block.
Sure. Thanks, Camilla. Thanks, everyone. And as said, really excited to probably take a look here or take you through the second block. We're gonna take a look on how the digital environment and how digital probably learning experiences can help us to foster the learning success and the learning experience generally. Combined with the physical one, and I think the first block was really a great start on that already. When we probably think about the past 2 years, a lot has changed, obviously, for everyone. Staying at home, basically being in some sort of digital realm almost all the time, or a vast majority of time, and I think that's something that obviously affected universities and teaching as well. The so-called metaverse, and I feel like no one really knows what it is at this point, has been around pretty much for longer as well, but I think it really picked up last year and probably the year before, with Facebook renaming themselves to Meta, and also putting a lot of developers on that. Obviously, within the crypto scene, a huge NFT push, which now enables really everyone to own digital assets and properties, probably for the first time ever, because it's saved on a public blockchain. Generally, everyone really has a lot of more digital and virtual interactions, especially I think the future generation that will become students, are becoming students right now, or are the students at this point, and as well in the future part, basically growing up with social media, with smartphones, and obviously digital gaming environments. So I think that's really going to be interesting to see how the next talk evolves, and we have 4 guests on that. They're going to take us through different topics here. The first one is Professor Neil Leach. He's a co-founder of Digital Futures and an adjacent professor at the University of Southern California, as well as a professor at Tunji University. And he's going to take us into e-learning experiences and how tools can probably help us democratize academic teaching and learning here. And with that being said, hey Neil, and the stage is yours.
Hi, can you see my screen? Is that?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, maybe I could just say that I'm actually no longer at USC. I teach at different institutions, but that's not important. What I want to do today, and I have very little time to talk about the last 20 years in some ways, because I want to set the scene and point out how the building blocks for online education were already in place before COVID, but how COVID, in some sense, thrust us into the future and forced us to go online. I divided this talk into a series of very short kind of comments, and I want to start off by the notion of so how do I change my screen? Is that it? Oh, can you see that? Hello? Can you? I'm just trying to make sure that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Right?
We saw. It was possible to see it, but I think you cannot hear it when you're when I'm gone. But we were able to see it clearly.
Okay. So I want to start back in 1999. I was invited by Bernard Schumi to become a visiting professor in Columbia University in New York, which is an extraordinary experience. And I asked Bernard whether there's any chance of staying on a full-time appointment there, and he said not in the near future. But why don't you become a visiting professor, a nomadic professor like Greg Lynn or Manuel Delander and a few other people who'd established this thing? The idea being that if you've got a certain body of knowledge, you might as well give it in different institutions rather than just one. So I myself became a visiting professor in Dessau in 2003. I was supported by the DAD, and I discovered a number of things from going there. First of all, what became very clear is that the German government had instituted English as an international language, and that had made a huge difference. It allowed people like myself to teach outside the English-speaking world. Secondly, we discovered that cheap flights, EasyJet and so on, made it possible for a professor to fly from London to Berlin each week and back. Thirdly, what became very clear is the students who came to Dessau, and they grew to a huge number in the space of time when I was there, they were part of an educational tourism thing that was happening. People wanted to study elsewhere, and they would do it in places like Dessau or indeed in Barcelona, where I came to teach in 4 different institutions in 1 year because it was a very popular place for master programs. And finally, the other thing I've discovered at Dessau was that actually talent is everywhere. In Dessau, we attracted students from places where they couldn't afford to study elsewhere. We attracted students from places like Kosovo, from Bangladesh, from Nicaragua, from an extraordinary range of places. And I discovered that the top 2% anywhere in the world were smart, even though they couldn't afford to study in places like the Architectural Association or Harvard. The next topic I want to address is the notion of not the nomadic professor, but the nomadic program, how particularly doctoral programs could be, in a sense, nomadic. This was established, the London Consortium was established in London. It was a combination of different schools, including the Architectural Association, where I've been teaching, but also other institutions. And it recognized basically that no institution really had enough expertise to cover the range for a doctoral program. It therefore brought together all these people from different institutions, as it were, piggybacking on the back of those institutions. Interestingly also, although it was drawing upon institutions that had their own physical space, the London Consortium had no physical space. It literally was nomadic, and I can remember giving a lecture in the back room of a pub, which they rented out especially for that particular purpose. The next step was really when I set up my own program in digital design and subsequently architecture and urbanism at the European Graduate School in Saas-Fee in Switzerland, a school that was famous for having people like Derrida and very famous philosophers come and teach. And what they basically realized was that the Saas-Fee, this beautiful village up in the mountains in Switzerland, was empty during the summer months when the skiing season was not happening. So they landed there and had a 3-week, very intensive course in the mountains up in Switzerland. And that was an incredible experience. We had a dream team, I would say, of people teaching on there, some of the most extraordinary people in the world, and we were able to bring them together, all together in this Swiss mountain village for this extraordinary moment. Unfortunately, the program dissolved after 2 years when we had a new dean who wasn't very keen on computation, and he simply got rid of the program. But then it migrated. The program itself migrated to Chongqing University in Shanghai, one of the leading schools of architecture in the world. And over the summer months, we literally replicated that scenario. For 3 weeks, we brought together almost the same dream team to go and teach on the program in Shanghai. Subsequent to that, I've become the director of the Doctor of Design program at Florida International University, where I teach not at USC. I left there 10 years ago. This program was initially envisaged as a program that was going to be 70% online and 30% in person. Instead of meeting in the mountains, we're going to meet on the beach. What happened, however, is that COVID kicked in. The program was actually started in January 2020, and we were forced to be completely online. And actually, we adapted very easily, and we operate online. And we have students all over the world, in Australia, in China, in South America, in the Middle East, in Europe, and so on. And we meet online collectively, and frankly, it works incredibly well. But I also want to talk about another initiative beyond my kind of doctoral program, that is the Digital Futures Initiative, something that I was co-founder of back in 2011. And we started off from humble beginnings. We had only about 10 students in the first year, but gradually over time, it built up into being probably the most successful series of workshops, conferences, and exhibitions in the world. By 2019, we had 800 students coming to join us on this particular program, which importantly, we made completely free. The big challenge, of course, came in 2020 with COVID. And initially, we made this kind of assessment that it was going to be absolutely impossible to meet online, to meet in person. Therefore, we canceled everything. But by April 2020, by which time I was holding my final reviews for my studio, we realized that actually there are possibilities afforded by the digital realm that made other things completely possible. I had people joining me on my review from China, from Europe, from the States, from all over the world. And it seemed that rather than being an impediment, the digital realm actually opened up the sphere of opportunity into something totally extraordinary. So we decided to launch this thing, the Digital Futures World. We went global and we went online. And I think what was interesting about this was it wasn't simply a question of going online and increasing the size, but rather we began to glimpse the possibility of a different mode of operating entirely. It seemed as though we had somehow broken through the walls of the classroom and opened up the possibility of democratizing education itself. Here you can see in 2020 where all the instructors came from and where all the students came from. We had overall 12,000 applications. I think 9,000 were given places. It was the most extraordinary event. And in 2022, we then got even larger. We had 108, I think, workshops in 2022, and including workshops in 9 different languages. And that then became the model of how we developed from then. You can see here the kind of exponential increase that was going on over the years. It got bigger and bigger, and suddenly going online, we increased the size enormously, and it's got even bigger soon than that since. I want to maybe just play you a quick excerpt after the first year of the kind of thank you speech I gave to those instructors, because it's kind of at that time we weren't quite sure what we'd done, but it seemed that something new was happening. I just want to take you through that to see if to talk about how we then try to use the platform in order to try and democratize education further. So here's me talking to the instructors, thanking them for their contributions.
At least on my end, I cannot listen to it. I don't have any sound. I'm not sure if it's on your end or
I see.
Igor.
Okay. It is on my end.
Okay.
I don't know how I can share the sound on. Normally I do it on Zoom. I share it.
Yeah.
Oh, does it play local video? What does that say? Does that?
I assume that's the one, but I also don't use this platform usually. So probably Igor or Camilla.
Let me just try that to see.
Sure.
Let me try this. Okay. Oh no, it's not. No, it's not going to allow me that. Okay. Let me cancel that.
Otherwise, in settings, there's but I think that's not for sharing. Probably you need to redo this the thank you speech.
Okay. Let me simply. All right. In that case, let me not. I will just simply paraphrase what I said in that
Yes,
thing.
perfect.
I mean, I
Thank
think
you.
it's essentially. I think what we discovered then that was something potentially, and at that time we weren't even sure. We were experimenting. What could you do online? Suddenly there's this whole new domain that opened up. The possibility that we could do things in a different sort of way, and we were just simply pushing it, testing it out, and pushing it to see what would happen. Anyway, as a result of that, and so I'll just skip over that speech. But as a result of that, we came up with a kind of new mission, and the idea of Digital Futures was that somehow we could use this platform to overcome all these divisions, to bring these ideas to people throughout the world, the kind of people, the students, for example, that I've been teaching at Dessau from all the poor countries in the world, from to allow them to get access. It seemed to us that we had to transform that, and also to recognize that really education in a world that it was frankly is not equal, where vaccination is not available in certain countries, and so on and so on and so on, and education is unaffordable to certain individuals. We need to try and share ideas and try and use this platform to kind of open up education so it became a human right and not a privilege of the wealthy. And also, as a result of all that, we began to then open up further into different language channels. This, for example, in the last few months, we've opened up channels in Arabic, Farsi, Spanish, and we've got the language channel coming up in Portuguese. And you can see that in some cases, we've had 20,000 people watching our videos. And this has been enormously successful. People really appreciated it. And that is also in line with our idea of being more inclusive, not simply using English, but actually opening up to other people in different sort of languages. The next step, and it was to try and think about how could you use this platform also as a way of transforming doctoral education. We'd already seen that you could use these kind of nomadic programs to bring together academics, the dream team of academics from across the world, to come and teach in places like Saspei or in Shanghai. What if you were to use this platform and to try and bring the best academics online? In other words, at the moment, the problem of doctoral education is you get a few individuals being taught by one professor who doesn't really know that much of more than a particular subject in one particular classroom. What if you were to take a global platform and bring together a dream team of the best professors on the world, so everybody had access to that particular thing? This was just one of a series of these things that we've been launching. This one is on AI, neuroscience, and architecture, and it's currently running. And we're literally getting some of the best thinkers in the world and bringing them together and making them available to everyone throughout the world. And in some cases, we're getting 5,500 views. The numbers are quite extraordinary. I want to then just mention briefly, I'm going to be short on, I thought it was good because I can't play this other video, but just mention how we've been speculating about the future of education on this program. And just to say, this is what can happen. We bring together people from all over the world. In this picture here, there is someone from Kuala Lumpur, Xishan from Shanghai, Sarita from India, Antonio from Denmark, Sina Mustafi from Delft, Areti from Yak, myself in California, Nadia Tarani in New York, Amit Assad in Egypt, and so on. we have this platform where literally everyone can come together. And some of the debates we've been having have been incredibly intense. It's like some kind of global brain. You literally bring everyone together and you have this astonishing discussion. But this particular session was about the future of education. We'd had already some discussions during the Digital Futures Festival about this. And we invited Sanjay Sama from MIT to talk about these things. Now, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to hear these things, but let me skip this video. But I just want to say that what Areti Markopoulou from YAC was speculating was how we could really transform the notion of what the educator was, less the notion of the content provider, as though the professor was the person with all the knowledge, and rather the notion of somehow that the professor became a kind of curiosity stimulator, not someone who was trying to convey all the knowledge in their head to another person, but rather to recognize that maybe there are other kind of places where we could find knowledge. In the response to the comment that Reti made, which I can't show you because you can't hear the sound on it, Sanjay Sama said, yes, well, to be honest, if I were to point to where the best knowledge is available, it is already on YouTube. It's not as though any of us necessarily has the advantage of knowing all these things. We need to maybe learn from YouTube. And so this is just an example of what I'm doing right now at Florida International University. I'm teaching in 3 different institutions. I'm completely online. I'm based in California, but I'm teaching people all over the world. And this is how we're doing it. I mean, first of all, this is one particular week. I've been asked to give what they call sort of 5 to 15 minute TED Talk like things, and I call them capsules, whereby I record these things and they're canned, as it were, they're delivered in advance. The advantage of doing them in short stages, not only is that the attention span of most students fairly short, and therefore it's been shown that the TED Talk format actually works quite well, but it also allows me to maybe update these from year to year and not necessarily do without having to change the entire lecture. So these, I am assuming, are going to last for 3 or 4 years without having to update them. But if I do need to update one of them, I can do it without affecting the rest. Now, importantly, also, I would point out that I'm incorporating TED Talks into this discourse. It seems to me, why not? Because this is this in particular comment on how computers are using producing images. Blaise Agüeri-Arcos is probably one of the leading people in the world to talk about these things. And why not bring the best people into the thing? I also have assigned certain suggested further reading videos that refer also to some of the material on digital futures. What then we're getting towards is a new sort of domain in which we're trying to shifting the idea of the professor as being someone who has all the knowledge, is delivering all things, rather to being someone who's kind of pointing out where the knowledge is and how it can be accessed, with a view to being a kind of someone who's kind of accompanying the student on a journey, not someone who's telling them what to do, but rather who is in a sense learning with them. So this is just the kind of, this seems to me the kind of way in which things are happening. And I guess what I've been trying to point out today is that essentially that we are in the process of maybe I can unshare my screen, a process of evolving a new model of education whereby we can extend these things elsewhere and allow other people to partake and enjoy these educational ideas. I'm sorry that I lost my 2 videos that were kind of essential to the whole thing.
Thanks, Neil, for all this quite impressive input, how you were able to scale through digital tools to really bring education and high-class education, high-class professors to way more people than it might have been probably possible, having them on some of the key institutions that we know all over the world. I'm happy to probably dig deeper on that in the second panel. But before we go into there, we're going to have 3 more inputs, and I'm excited for the next one, which is Professor Gary Burnett. He teaches at the Human Factors Engineering and Human-Computer Interaction area at the University of Nottingham. And for several years, he has educated and researched in terms of VR and visual reality, and to what extent that can revolutionize teaching and learning. And what I found interesting, and I'm eager to hear more about it, that with COVID, they actually moved their class into a totally VR environment. And that's also the subject he's gonna talk about for today. So thanks, Gary, for being with us. And I'm excited for the next few minutes hearing from you.
Great, thanks. Yeah. And yeah, sorry, the way that we're doing this sort of screen sharing, my Mac didn't seem to like this particular platform that you're using. So yeah, I'll be reliant on someone to sort of to move me forward on the slides. But yeah, so I'm Gary Burnett, Professor of Human Factors, University of Nottingham. And this is really just about the sort of my experiences of using social VR in my teaching over the last couple of years. So you can see me down in that bottom left in one of my many sort of guises in sort of avatar form. Okay, move next slide. Yeah, there he is. Brilliant. Okay, so yeah, there's obviously a lot of potential here for social VR in higher education, and the top two there in blue are particularly sort of prominent issues here. We've got on one side, we've got the technology accelerating in hardware and software platforms, and on the other side here, we've got the fact we've had all this disruption due to the pandemic, which has pushed a lot of people online. It's allowed more exploration of digital learning spaces, but it's also changed students' expectations and what they want from their education. And then you throw in all the sort of existing issues about demands on physical spaces with more and more students, concerns around sustainability. Buildings require energy, people moving, coming onto campus, coming to physical buildings requires clearly sort of energy as well. And then this whole area, sort of global learners. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you may come to a space and be a community of learners on a particular topic. So from my perspective as a human factors, human computer interaction researcher, I saw this as an opportunity to be able to explore these issues in the concept of my teaching. So to think about, okay, if my students only interact with me and each other in avatar form in a virtual space throughout the whole semester, how can I do that in an engaging and an effective way? Okay, so this is where the sort of concept of Notopia came through. Effectively, Notopia is a virtual teaching island. It's sort of changed a bit over the last couple of years. It started off in 2020 as a single building, sort of in the top right there, on a Mediterranean style sort of calming environment, calming island. In 2021, it became more sort of bigger, became a sort of campus. Nottingham's well known as a medieval city, so it became a medieval castle that was floating in the sky. So that's the sort of middle picture. And it was basically used. It was the only real way that I interact with my students. It's sort of a particular module that's about simulation and virtual reality. So it very much lends itself to exploring these sorts of issues. 2020, I had 49 final year undergraduate and postgraduate taught students in engineering and computing. Because of how successful it was in 2020, I'm paying the price for that in terms of the numbers. It's suddenly become a lot more popular, my optional module, and almost doubled in size for this year just gone. Most students are accessing Notopia on their desktop computers, laptops, occasionally tablets. 2020, the only students who could use a VR headset were those who happen to have them anyway, and I suspect more and more students will have them over time, sort of their own headsets. Because of the success, I was able to then get faculty funding for 15 headsets. I could lend them out 1 week at a time to students. Almost 40% of the students took up that offer and had a headset for at least a week during the
during the semester, during the module. Okay, next slide, please. So what sort of things did I do in Notopia? Effectively 3 different things. There were pre-recorded lectures. I'll show you an example of one of those in a minute. This year I started doing some of those live, just small scale, go through a few slides type mini lectures. The main activity was these weekly small group seminars where you'd be in working together, doing things like treasure hunts, show and tells. I bring in sort of experts from around the world to have fireside chats to talk about key topics. And we also had these sort of quite interactive design workshops. And the third thing, which actually is also pretty interesting, is that for them to come and talk to me, instead of coming to my office, they'd come to my virtual office. I'm not sure if you can see that in the bottom right, but in this year's version of Notopia, where it's more medieval, it was a tent, sort of the tutor tent, where that was a private zone, so sound wouldn't come out and sound wouldn't go in. So when you're in that with a student, you're having a private conversation, and the students really loved that opportunity to come and meet me in that way. And yes, this was all very highly social, and it's exploiting all the different possibilities that VR provides. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this should be a video, hopefully, that will play with me doing one of just a few 15 seconds of me doing starting a lecture. Okay, is that going to play as a video? Not sure if it's going to play as video. No, it's not. It doesn't look like the videos are going to play. That's a shame. So, I'm not sure how you're doing this. Okay, so I'm going to have to just talk through what's in this. There's a lot of my videos are available on YouTube. Some of them are sort of public, or others if I can provide links to. Is that playing? No, it's not playing, is it? Okay. What you would see in a video clip here, which is a bit of a shame, is groups of students in different parts of the Notopia gathering area interacting, talking to one another, and also interacting with some post-it notes that they've created, which they then need to move to other parts of Notopia. So they're interacting with each other, they're interacting with the environment, and then they have the freedom to sort of move around the environment to then take them to other things that I've sort of hidden around the space. Okay, can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, this is one that's got quite a lot of interest. This was a design workshop thinking about advanced human-machine interfaces for future robotaxi autonomous vehicle services. And you've got Max there as an avatar thinking about how you would get the door open. And he might use his phone, and there'd be a QR code that would be on the door handle, and he could then get in. And you, in the video, you can see these students sort of deciding they're all going to get in the car and go for a little drive in there. Yeah, and they've got the power here that I can just bring in these sorts of objects and get students to engage with this world. Okay, sorry, move on. So yes, this has been a research project, lots of data that's been collected along the way on both subjective and objective data. Next slide, please. Okay, this is really just sort of highlighting just some of the data just in raw form with some typical quotes from students. What this does is, I think, highlight some of the key themes that come through here. The experience was overwhelmingly positive. The ratings from students were off the scale, really, really positive. And there's a number of different things going on here. One of them is gamification. Okay, we're taking the students' sort of knowledge of 3D worlds and being in avatars, and we're bringing it to education. It becomes very interactive, can be particularly immersive, especially if you've got a VR headset on, and students there comparing that with teams. The freedom to move around the space is really important, because you can't do that sort of thing in the real world in the same degree at all. The actual environment itself can be particularly calm. It can be very easy and not so awkward for many people, particularly those who might be more shy, more introvert. The point bottom left is really important. You could talk to other people without feeling the center of attention. That's a really interesting issue. And the fact that people were engaging with others that they wouldn't normally have engaged with, because in the real world people tend to sit with the people they know, is also a really interesting sort of advantage of this. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is sort of the sort of first paper that's sort of come from this, encapsulating it. It's really just saying there are 5 overall issues here that are dictating the success of this type of experience. There are issues to do with the avatar, there are issues to do with the virtual environment, there are issues to do with the group dynamics that are involved. There's also issues to do with the type of objects that you have in the world, and also the magic that can be there. I'm just going to talk about 2 of them in the next couple of slides to finish off. I've lost all track of time, sorry. Hopefully I'm not going over. This is really saying that there are actually a lot of issues to do with the space that I've sort of reflected on as I've been going along in this this learning process for me as well as for the students. There's a whole set of things about who's designing this space, who's actually then going on to build it, and what involvement do the students have in that. And I've allowed the students to modify things to an extent. And next year, I'm thinking I might actually allow them to create their own little sort of portal spaces that you can go to where they can then demonstrate work. So you get that sense of student owned. There's what platform you use. There are many platforms that you can draw upon. There's whether or not you recreate real spaces that exist on campus, or you do start having imaginary spaces. That's an interesting debate. In that picture in the bottom right, you can see I had some 3D photosphere balls of real world spaces, and those are the different campuses of the University of Nottingham. You've got how functional or fantastical the world might be. You want it to be functional so you can do things in the world, but you can exploit the fantasy side and draw on students' curiosity as well, and motivation. How complex should it be? The number of polygons is really important in these worlds. The space is persistent. They can come there whenever they like, and that's a real powerful advantage. Do you keep the world the same, or do you change it? I themed Notopia, so it was different for Halloween. It was different building up to Christmas. I could do different things in order to sort of make it more exciting for students to turn up each week. And yeah, this is essentially a case of human-centered design. The users are the students, the teachers. The context is driven by learning. Am I running out of time? You just come up. I can't hear you.
Muted, yeah, sorry. I'm not sure if is it fine for you, or do you have another slide?
I just 2 more slides.
Probably just wrap up. I don't know, 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so there's just a lot to talk about here.
I know, it's an exciting topic.
Yeah, we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, this is really just saying another big theme here is avatars. Okay, and 4 themes are emerging from this based on the interviews and the surveys, the observations. No, I won't go through all those, but just to highlight the bottom one, which I think is particularly powerful. Students have anonymity in these worlds, but they're still able to express their identity, and that anonymity allows them to give them confidence in the world. But there are dangers to that. There is a flip side to this. How do we know our students when we don't see them and we're not we don't have that same relationship with them? And just onto my last slide. So yeah, this is an ongoing experiment. It's been really interesting doing this. There are many themes that will dictate the success of VR. We're doing more and more with this as we go forward. It's not just that particular module. I'm starting to think about these in all sorts of different aspects of my teaching now. And I just wanted to raise the whole thing of blended learning or hybrid spaces. We started exploring this a bit with Notopia, and you can see it particularly in the top right, where we could have students in a real world space who can look through a window to the students in avatar form in the virtual space, and they can see back in the other direction. And you can then start to combine these worlds, the real world and the virtual world, to form a single community of learners. Okay, I'll leave it there. I think this was just a closing slide.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Gary. This is almost a perfect blend to the next speaker, and you know how to link the physical and the digital one in these experiences. So thanks for sharing everything that you've tested over the past years, and I'm really excited to probably dig a bit more deeper later. And with that being said, we will move on to Professor Christian Kohls. He's the Dean of the Faculty Computer Science and Engineering Sciences at the TH Köln. And he's actually investigated and transformed several spaces for hybrid learning scenarios, and basically how to incorporate design sprints and hackathons and distributed field research specifically in this blending environment. So I'm eager to hear from you, Christian, the patterns of educational spaces to the digital world. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm happy to share some of the experience that we had in transforming our campus, and we're still doing it. I hope you can see my my screen. If not, just tell me so. Otherwise, I assume that you can see it very well. So I'm actually sitting on this campus right now. This is the building here, and I'm sitting there where my mouse pointer is right now. So that's the office I'm in right now. Our campus is it's part of the University of Applied Sciences in Cologne, but we have our own campus in Gummersbach, which is about 50 kilometers away. And we are just one faculty here. So that means we have a little more freedom in making decisions, how we do our spaces. And I will just share some of these things. So actually, when I talk about the campus, I'm thinking about the physical presence here being on site, but how we can connect that seamlessly with the digital world. And you will see that in a lot of slides. I think the campus, not only in our location, but everywhere, is actually changing. You see there's a lot of collaboration. There's more project work. I totally agree with the presentations that we have seen earlier, that it's actually that we don't want to sit just row by row and observe and just listen. The real power of being on the campus is starting collaborations, because everything else works pretty well with digital tools at the moment as well. So I will focus on three parts. I have the name or the word pattern in my title. Patterns are good practices. And we use that for planning, but also for learning about what other universities have been doing. I will present some patterns for the actual spaces that we created, and also show some pictures how the educational scenarios work out there. So let's start with design patterns, what they are. So I'm not an architect. I'm actually from the field of computer science. So yes, maybe I do computer architecture or software architecture, but we use a lot of the works from Christopher Alexander, who has written this book with some colleagues more than 50 years ago, almost. And they have looked out for existing problems that occur again and again, and we're looking for solutions that they could use again and again. And so we were actually looking out for many different solutions that exist and how we could use them to build new spaces on our campus, and also to think about why the decisions that we do, or the designs that we are using for our spaces, why they're actually working. So not just making these things because the digital tools offer so much more. We also always want to understand how is it changing actually the interaction between students and teachers and external partners. So we're actually going on educational safaris. So we're visiting other places that we find inspiring, make pictures of it. We here's some examples that we identified a lot of open spaces at universities that invite collaboration. We found cozy places that invite learning. We also liked places where there was a certain degree of playfulness that opened up our minds. And yeah, so we were using this kind of patterns. We were collecting them, trying to see, well, what do we see again and again? And we were using this to actually plan the spaces on our campus. So this is in German, obviously, but what you can see here is we had a lot of mood boards that showed how we wanted to have that. And then we were defining what are the primary functions and the secondary functions that we hope what will happen in these spaces. Hopefully even more than we were planning, but we were thinking about what is the main activity or activities actually that we want to encourage students to do in these different spaces. Well, of course, it's not just planning on paper. We try to prototype as much as we can. So when we have a space that we want to transform, we're not just doing that on paper. We actually go into that space and think about what can we do. So you use cardboard boxes to get an idea of what should be the right dimensions. Then we improve the prototypes. Then we find some stuff that looks like it actually, and step by step we put in some technology in there, and only then we start with 3D models, and finally we have a space that is equipped with, in this case, interactive whiteboards, a large table in the center of the room that you act as a stage for ideation. And so this prototyping process, it gives us the opportunity to let students also participate, give feedback what they like, and have actually an experience before we invest too much money into the room, and it makes it possible for us to experiment with different setups. Also, participation is really important for us to see what students would like to see. So we were running some educational hackathons where students were using Lego bricks, where they could express what they were hoping to find on campus. And we will continue that in the next term when more students will be on campus again. But it also goes down to the level there where we had students actually make decisions about what kind of basement do you want, right? So what would be what kind of wallpapers do you want to see? Another form that we will run in the summer is an unconference, a bar camp where students just can make a spontaneous presentation and share their ideas and hopes, what they want to see. And of course, we also run a lot of projects where students actually design these spaces and have to do research. What are the forces? What are the requirements to make these to have new spaces that make more use of both the physical space for more collaboration and also to incorporate digital tools in that. So what kind of patterns did we find? I think some examples of what kind of spaces we will have see more and more in the future are innovation spaces, design studios, more and more maker spaces, and of course, you've seen maker spaces already at many universities, and that's the trick about patterns. We try to find things that already exist and try to use them on our campus as well. So how do these spaces look like? We have hybrid design studios. You see there's a lot of, there are screens there, but there are also building blocks, digital building blocks that students can work with. We try to use building blocks that are low threshold for or provide an easy entry level for students who have no technical background as well. We try to use technology to have more galleries to show other students what's possible, to inspire to have presentations on open spaces. We also experimented with having an educational pop-up store or pop-up space, actually in a shopping mall, where we were running workshops and courses, and people could just, yeah, as you see here in the background, these are just visitors of the shopping mall, and they can see what are the activities, and they can actually come in, provide feedback to students. Students can show their design mock-ups, their apps to not only their friends, we always have a bias, but actually to people who are just passing by.
I think we're losing Christian. Can you still hear us? It's breaking. Okay, he's gone. Camila, Igor, I guess. Okay,
Oh,
you're back.
I'm
I
still
think
there.
we were, yeah, okay,
Okay.
we were using losing you, so probably you need
Okay.
to share again, and then we just continue.
Okay, so when did you
Thank you.
when did you lose me here?
I think a bit before when you talked about the mall, but that was
Okay.
basically covered, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Okay.
so you can probably go to the next one then.
Okay. Okay. I
Cool.
think that was the physical mute button I pushed. Anyway, so yeah, so that gives us an opportunity that real people can provide feedback. And what we see here is yeah, small project boxes where students can sit down with their laptops or tablets, and we need to yeah, equip these places with power, of course, and people can sit there, use it as learning cinemas. So if we have our lectures as streams ready, I don't think that students should always sit at home and just watch there alone. They should actually meet on campus, watch it whenever they want, but then start a discussion about it. So that's one example of the scenarios that we hope to see that are enabled through these spaces where we integrate digital tools. One example is hybrid collaboration, where you see our students, they start working in the physical space with sticky notes, but then you also see there's an interactive whiteboard, and you can use your smartphone, connect to a session without any registration. Then you can make a picture of what's on the table, and then you can start actually write on things that are physically on the table, and that gives us the opportunity to document the process during the process, not just the end result, but actually what have been different considerations of the students. That it gives them an opportunity for more reflection, and in the end, they can just upload everything into the learning management system. So this is our idea of a seamless transformation. They can take that, what they have developed in one space, to another space, of course, easily, if we have more and more of these whiteboards. So you see, it's not all happening in the digital world. A lot of things work very well if you have a haptic experience, but to connect these worlds seamlessly is our goal. We also think about the other way around, how to bring the digital world into the world, actually physically into the world, by having 3D prints or making intangible things more tangible, by having code blocks that are actually put on the table, and students can collaborate by moving things around and discuss different algorithms. And so we use these spaces for design sprints, more and more for hackathons. We try to make hackathons more integrated into the standard curriculum, so that students have a sprint of 1 week, maybe working until late at night with some pizzas, and then they get credit points for that as well. And of course, our small smartphones, they are really great research tools. You can take them to make interviews, to make notes, to make pictures, and then bring that into the campus onto an interactive wall, so that you can share your observations with other students, and categorize things and use that for planning and developing based on what you found out in the field research. And this is my final example. I think this is what I hope to see in the future. I think this is a great evening, this conference. And this is when we're opening the campus again. This would be a great opportunity to stream that not only to my desktop, but actually to sit together with students on campus so that we can see experts from all over the world and then have the very a discussion with students that are close to each other and have the same feeling as we would have on a real conference with coffee breaks and the social conversations and interactions that we have. So these are some reading tips. I think we will provide the slides, very inspiring books on hybrid learning spaces and creative spaces that we were using to build, to transform the spaces on our campus. So, and of course, if you have great spaces on your campus, as I said, we are on an educational safari. So we are always eager to learn about that, take pictures and get in touch with you. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some images from our campus.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us and sharing it. And I can recommend some of the books as well. I have had not all of them, but I've read a few of them. Thanks, and let's move probably quickly through for the last speaker here in this session, who is Maruf Fakri, and he's the vice president of the product management of Labster. And Labster basically, if I understand correctly, works closely with universities to help them transform their campus using cutting-edge technology to keep them at the forefront of student education. And I think that's exactly what he's going to talk about. And with that being said, I'll hand over to you, Maruf, and thank you for being here.
All right, no problem. Thanks. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Ooh. I'm going to specifically talk about science today because that's what I'm passionate about, and that's a lot of what Labster does. But hello, everyone. I'm Maruf. I'm actually based in Switzerland, although I'm Australian, which you can probably hear. So I hope you can understand my strange dialect of English. I'm part of the founding team at Labster, which is a European education company. It started about in 2013. We're now about 300 people, I think, and we make digital science labs to help science professors make better use of their face-to-face time with students by augmenting it with technology. A small disclaimer though, I love science. I grew up watching Mythbusters, where they destroy things in the name of science. And my personal mission is kind of showing as many people how fun science can be, really, and how engaging it can be taught. So I'm a little bit biased, I think, in how universities can use the idea of the Eduverse and technology to support teaching in STEM. I'm a very kind of hands-on science presenter, you could say. I used to have a job where I'd actually have to dress up as characters and similar and do kind of interactive science shows and workshops with students of all ages where, you know, things explode and students get to try kind of wild experiments. And I took the blame a lot of the time if something didn't go wrong, like something exploded or it made a big mess. These were very physical, immersive experiences that included, you know, storytelling and these types of things. And to me, what I've seen is like these are the types of things that make students' eyes light up when you're teaching science. It makes them curious and ultimately opens them up to the learning. But there is some challenges with that, which I'll talk about as we go. So you might think that, you know, the idea of the Eduverse and similar, or using technology or doing things digitally in general wouldn't really sit well with me because I have a very strong need and desire to do hands-on activities. But over the years, I've sort of discovered that really it does offer us a lot of opportunity. And that's what a lot of the speakers have spoken about already. Obviously, it can help us scale the reach, doing things digitally, you know, scale the reach of our teaching. But where I think it gets really exciting is how we can use it to go far beyond what's physically possible, especially in science, and enhance the precious in-person teacher-student time that happens often in the lab or in class. So I hope that's what I can convince you of today. So what we've done at Labster is take one of the earliest forms of the hybrid learning concept, the flight simulator, which is actually about 100 years old, and apply it to the teaching of science at university and high school. This is not a new concept. These types of simulators get used a lot already in the teaching of STEM, but instead of just recreating the kind of lab experience that's often in science and engineering subjects one-to-one, we wanted to really go further. And use the digital experience to kind of explore the full potential of engaging students to really complement the face-to-face lab experience or face-to-face time teachers might have. So what we've kind of built runs across devices, and it looks a little bit like this. I'm going to play a video. You won't have to hear me talking the whole time. There'll be two other speakers. So let's see if this works. Get the sound going.
Sound is not going, but we still see it. But I hear a strange noise in the background. I think it might be your microphone. We can hear you clearly, or I can hear you clearly.
Then you just explain what's happening. As you can see, it's a full lab experience. They're usually 20 to 40 minutes, and the student kind of plays a game where they go through scenarios, they interact with the lab equipment, they are able to zoom into the molecular level. There's an inbuilt textbook as well where they can look up theory, and then it's assessed and graded along the way as well to examine how well the student is mastering the concepts by prompting them with questions and immediately giving them feedback on how they're doing in the lab. And what's I think interesting about this is you can explore so many different scenarios that may not be available to a student typically in with their facilities, especially around the world where some classes don't have access to these types of labs. And this is what we've really tried to do, is kind of highlight the things that can't be done in the lab and build them into an experience which kind of melds together the microscopic and the context, etc., and kind of a very seamless experience that can be plugged directly into a course. So I'll go through kind of some of the key things, because I get quite excited about very specific things in this. And in my mind, there's a lot of unique things that can add to the learning space when you develop kind of experiences like this. The first, I think, is the scenarios we use. These are kind of immersive scenarios that we build in sort of in a gaming platform, and these kind of give students context. This kind of gives them a chance to take the lab experience and really apply it directly to a real world problem, which is often something that now gets used more and more in teaching, is like problem-based learning and really trying to tie create an applied scenario for students to use. So we might have them analyzing a sample on Mars and then going back in the lab and kind of looking at the sample and determining if there's water, for example, or treating a patient in hospital. And this for me is really powerful. It's both for their imagination, but it also immediately reinforces the why of why they're learning a particular subject. And in my experience, for teachers, this can be very hard to do in the classroom. It's definitely possible, and teachers can do it, but for students, it can sometimes seem a bit abstract. So I think the digital experience really helps with this this component. The other thing which I really love is that we try to capture the beauty of learning through discovery. And so in one of the simulations we've built, the students that are in first year ecology at university, they actually visit an untouched environment on a new planet, and they apply like real ecological techniques in this kind of simulation to examine an entirely new ecosystem with new life forms, and they collect samples. So they actually learn the techniques that they would do in the real job on Earth, but there's like an added spark to it. And I think this kind of is something that is very challenging to do. And I think that, the technologies that we have now can really help enhance the learning in this way. The bonus is that actually they can't Google the answers either, because a lot of these things are imaginary. And this sort of strikes a chord with some of the teachers who are worried about students being able to sort of cheat when they're online. On the kind of really practical side, a lot of our professors and administrators sort of love this component, but there's much less waste. especially with expensive consumables. But the more important thing is students get to repeat the experiments several times before they do it in real life. So they really understand what they're doing, and there's much less chance of them wasting things like plastics and gas, etc. I'm a big fan of making a mess in the lab, for sure, based on my background, but it can get expensive over time. So what this sort of environment does is it gives them a chance to practice, to make mistakes in a very safe and self-paced environment, where then when they come into the lab, they're much more confident to do the experiment, and they start to connect the dots better. This one to me is the most important one. I worked with some dangerous substances as a science presenter, and some things have gone wrong, but they can actually make mistakes in these environments and not get injured, which usually everyone appreciates. Learning by failure is a really important part of science, but it's really hard to do, at least ethically. So we kind of give students a chance of getting it wrong. They can see what happens, and then they can sort of try again to avoid the mistake. We don't always do this. It's only in kind of specific cases where we think making a mistake adds value. It's not a free-for-all for students because sometimes they get lost. It is a semi-guided experience, but there are moments where they can do something wrong, something can blow up, they're explained why, and then they're able to repeat it again, especially in situations where it's very dangerous. In one of our labs, it's a safety lab actually, there's actually an accident that happens, and it gets acid in the student's eye, and they get to see what that looks like. And so the screen goes all blurry, and they have to quickly get to the wash basin to clean it out in time, otherwise they go blind. And it's a little bit cheeky, but it really does give students this experience of urgency, which is something you can create, an emotional response, and a seriousness to lab safety, which is very challenging to do when you have, just a safety manual or similar. So I think these types of things is where technology can really add value to the classroom, rather than just being a carbon copy of what's already taught in the lab. Obviously, I'm sure many of your imaginations have gone here. We can also build into the experiences modeling and visualizations of the invisible, which is often very hard for students to grasp because they're often abstract concepts. And there are a lot of videos and images kind of on YouTube, etc., that do this already. But I think what's really exciting about this type of technology is you can integrate it into the experience itself. So when they do the experiment, they can then zoom in at that time in situ and see what's happening, while they're doing it, and that really reinforces the learning. And then when they come into the lab, they can already imagine what's happening in their experiment when they're actually doing it face to face. And this is very hard to do, when you're actually in the lab and you're busy sort of doing the experiments physically. But this way you can prepare the students, you can give them that conceptual understanding before they then step in and take care of the actual lab work. This one's a bit more of a practical sort of note. Not all universities, as I'm sure you're aware, have the capabilities to change their infrastructure every time there's a new piece of equipment in the industry. And now it's changing so rapidly that it's very hard for campuses to keep up, or they simply can't afford enough of these equipments, like a ultrasonicator. I don't even know what that does, but I know it's expensive. They can't afford so many of them for every student. So this is where a tool like this, and I think the Eduverse, or whatever we decide to call it over time, it can really bridge the gap to help students kind of get this experience and work with equipment that's much closer to what they're going to experience when they leave university and go into the workforce. We model it off the latest equipment that's out there in the industry, and although this can sometimes backfire a little bit, some students have asked our university professors, why the equipment in their actual campus doesn't look as fancy or shiny as the virtual stuff, which is quite funny, but that's actually quite rare, to be honest. I won't go into super depth on the content. We've been at this for a long time. We've made hundreds of different simulations that last kind of 20 to 40 minutes. On average, what we've seen is teachers use between 5 or 10 of these per course that they teach. That way it's much more of a blend, and they don't have to completely rebuild things from the ground up, their infrastructure or their courses, etc. So it really gives teachers the flexibility to incorporate, just a couple here or there if they're not comfortable with the technology yet, or, take a whole suite of 10 and really build a course around it. And it really varies depending on their preference. I'll talk very quickly about kind of the student impact. It wouldn't be a STEM talk without a graph or two. So there are lots of journal studies out there already that shows combining kind of digital and physical experiences together improves learning outcomes, and actually several published about sort of our lab simulations themselves. But this one to me is my favorite, and I'll tell you why in a second. It's a study published in BMC Medical Education Journal by a European research team that were using Labster and kind of evaluating the impact of them. They divided a group of students into three groups based on their existing knowledge about a subject that they gained over the course of a semester. And you can see like the blue line are the kind of the ones at the top of the class, red in the middle, and the green lines are more the lower performing students according to the testing standards. And then they measured them after kind of using the lab sims in a course, and they compared the groups, and the students that typically were kind of on the low end, they actually caught up and improved much faster than the others. And this in itself isn't super surprising, but what was really kind of, to me, very interesting is when we looked at kind of motivation and self-efficacy, which is their belief in their own abilities, particularly on the right-hand side of this graph is where you see the self-efficacy. That low-performing group, which is the green line, they shot up in their terms of their confidence level, even taking over some of the other groups. Now, in science, belief in your own abilities is really critical. I mean, across the whole kind of learning experience in general, in any subject, it's really important. But it's especially important, I think, in science, where results don't always turn out the way you expect. So that confidence in what you've done to generate those results is actually very important. And this is why I believe, in my view, the trend of using these types of technologies is here to stay, because it has an impact that's far beyond the learning of the knowledge itself. It actually generates motivation, and it creates this confidence in students so that when they go into the next subject or the next topic, they've got a lot more confidence in their abilities. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were done, but probably I don't know how many slides you still have.
I have just a short video to play after this, actually, if that's all right.
Is it fine to probably skip that video so we have a little bit more time to
sure.
to share with the whole discussion? We're running a little bit late on the time.
No problem.
Oh,
then I'll just
fine.
wrap up with this. This is just interesting in terms of the trend on how something like this is being adopted pre-COVID and post-COVID. Before, like in 2016, 2017 school year, we had kind of 40,000 students using this type of tool. It was doubling every year until COVID. And you can see that the big jump at 2019, 2020, all of a sudden it's rocketed up, which is not super surprising, but it's definitely increasing as well. So this is, I think, becoming a trend. And we're already seeing this year that although it's sort of not as steep an adoption curve, it is still increasing at that steady rate. So I think this trend is kind of here to stay for sure. So I'll wrap up there and we can go to the discussion.
Thank you, Markov. Thanks so much. This is really impressive. Thanks for sharing what you've developed over the past years. And probably while Igor and Camilla will zoom in the other people in here, we can probably start with you and open up the discussion right away. Because I would be interested if you had any experience with some sort of learning formats that were really difficult for you to implement in a virtual setting, where you made the experience that the physical one is still a big plus there.
Sorry, that's a question for me?
Yeah, I think we could start with you, and then probably if the other ones have some insights there as well.
Yeah, some of the some of the cutting edge experiments are more challenging to do because you simply don't have access to the professors or the industry experts, and they don't have the time to help you. I think that's where the real barrier is. To be honest, for the general learning experiences, they're actually not too challenging. You can take the learning outcomes that a professor develops, you can take the experiments that they typically use and then sort of build and then enhance and build upon them. But where it gets really challenging is where you get very advanced to the point where we don't actually know what the outcome should be or what it looks like. So it's very much like we limit it to the first and third years or maybe first and fourth years of teaching. But as soon as you get into kind of more master's level and postdoc, there's a lot more that goes on to that's needed in the learning experience that you can't replicate. It's a lot more random.
I had a similar feeling saying for, let's say the lower semesters where people are, just replicating to majorly the lab environment. I had the feeling that that probably is a huge benefit from your end, while then later on where it's really about adding knowledge and experimenting and thinking about new stuff, it might be a bit more difficult. And that probably, Christian, would be from my side interesting as well to hear your opinion on that. If you, you know, to what extent have you had the experience in the past, what type of learning formats were able to easily replicate in a digital setting or in a hybrid setting, and where do you think it was difficulty?
Yeah, well, the easy one, of course, was the lecture. So that was actually, and it's the interesting part was that other people participated then in a on-site lecture, right? Participating was giving comments in the chat. So that was also interesting to see. Teamwork worked not so well. It was okayish, but the results were never as good as they were actually on campus, definitely. So I think that's where we will see actually hopefully more activity on campus again, where students meet and discuss together. And also, you know, there's learning going on after the lecture. And that's missing also, right? We stop the video stream and then everyone is left to himself. And on campus, you're not. You can share your thoughts. You can go on with it. And of course, there's some resources on a campus that you can't have online. But I think, as we just saw on the presentation before, this is a great opportunity to prepare students. At the end, they should have the real lab stuff in their hands, of course, but having this more practice online before, I think will lead to better results at the end.
And I think that's probably an interesting question to Gary, because you have tried to, you know, replicate a virtual campus, or at least a virtual learning experience or learning environment. And we actually had a question in the chat, and I wrote down a similar one going or listening to your talk. We were wondering, why do the virtual environments almost look so similar and almost a replication, and probably a bad replication of the physical environments? You know, did you experience some sort of you know, stuff that is more disattached from what we perceive in the physical world?
Okay, so I did start to talk about that a bit in one of sort of the later slides. You know, one of the fundamental questions that's quite apparent here in developing a space is the relationship between functional and fantastical, and so how and also how much you look to try to replicate something that already exists versus something that's you know, completely imaginary. And I think you can't. It is important to have functionality here that relates to your learning outcomes. So you know, the sort of things that I'm doing require breakout spaces. I need my students to gather somewhere and then go off to different spaces. And so they need to feel that those spaces have a degree of privacy associated with them. And you get a lot of really interesting issues here about the importance of things like walls. So you have a wall and people can feel that encloses them, and also has a degree of privacy. Now the reality is it may not necessarily have it, and that people that they can't see, or avatars they can't see on the other side of the wall, may be able to hear them really clearly. And you need to be able to sort of make these things very clear to people. So my private tutor tent that I had for students to come in had like a sort of a beam around it where it was very obvious that the sound, and I demonstrated it to the students, that when you went in there, you would not be heard outside. And some of the students that was really important, because they wanted to come and talk to me there about, for instance, their coursework, and they didn't want other students to hear those conversations. So, you know, the functionality part is important, but also if you start doing sort of crazy worlds with lots of fantasy, then that's also fun, engaging, motivating, etc. And you can start to play around with you know, with sort of interesting space as well. So yeah, it's the trade-off that's important here.
Probably Neil, you can add to that, because you were teaching on a global level architecture and the design of spaces. Was there also involved some sort of digital space design, as what Gary has done for his class to some extent?
No, we don't do that. I don't think we need that, frankly. I mean, we're already online. I mean, I think that I was explicit in this conversation. I think it's very different when you're working at a doctoral level. When you want to basically bring together the top people in the world, and one might be in China, one might be in Europe, and one might be in the States and something, and you can do that online. We had a session when we were talking about the philosopher Derrida, and we brought Bernard Schumi, we brought Peter Eisenman, and we brought someone from Europe together, and we can meet online. I mean, the kind of intensity of these discussions, the feedback you get is just something second to none. I mean, you come out. I mean, it's like a global brain in operation. You come out with a real. It's like it's so intense, and that's very different. I think for undergraduates it must be very different. When I was a student at the University of Cambridge, it was a lot of it was the lifestyle itself was something very special, and teaching online you might miss that. But certainly for doctoral research, it's you don't even do these kind of virtual games. But it is really very effective. I mean, just the fact that you can bring things together and understand, and that would otherwise not be possible, just opens up a whole new domain. And in fact, I just want to stress this. The fact that I live stream all my classes. And then when you can get 5,000 or more people elsewhere in the world listening to the live stream, and they can't afford to go and study in these places, but they can get access to those ideas. That's important. So I see what we're doing in terms of kind of like, especially with digital futures, as trying to provide a kind of TED Talk like logic where there's content online, so everyone around the world can do it. And one of the comments made about it was that it's a bit like what Uber has done for taxis. In other words, taxis were really slack until Uber came along and they actually improved their game. So by providing this content for certain countries, and I'm told that, for example, the professors in France are all dinosaurs, the students at least get access to something else that can give them a much better education. So it's a win-win situation as far as I'm concerned, and it's also more sustainable. You don't have to travel everywhere, you don't have to park and so on, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah, what I found very fascinating. Oh, sorry, Gary.
I was just going to come in on this. I think it is very interesting, the sort of comparison. Obviously, it will be impacted by different student groups. The difference between having a conversation with students in Teams and a conversation with students in a virtual world, and maybe also including an expert in there. It's certainly in my experience, it can be really difficult to get students to put their cameras on, to open up their mics and to interact. They might put stuff in the chat if you're lucky, but you find it very difficult. Whereas when I've done these sort of fireside chats with experts in VR, the students will just quite happily chat away to this expert, and they've got a front row seat. They're there with the expert in this world, and it doesn't have that same thing in Teams at all. Not for my students. Anyway.
Gary, that's exactly the comment my students make. They said, I feel like I've got a front row seat. In my first semester of teaching online, I changed it from a lecture into a seminar, just completely changed. So it was everybody got involved. It was the most magical experience. But front row seat's exactly the term they use.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, because what I certainly loved about studying in a physical environment, were the unplanned interactions. And my experience from working now in a digital realm, every interaction you're doing, if I'm calling someone because I somehow have a problem, or I might go to my professor because I have a problem, it's a planned interaction. Were you able, probably Neil, to incorporate some sort of unplanned, and to foster the spark of just seeing what other students were working on, what other probably also PhDers were researching on? Did you somehow manage to incorporate that dynamic?
Well, yes and no. I mean, so firstly, let me just say that our building in Miami is designed by Bernard Schumi, who believes in this concept of event spaces, and all the walkways and staircases were designed with that in mind, that you'd interact and bump into people, and that's where the conversations would take place. except not in COVID because the campus was empty. I think there are different things that happen and different sort of lines of communication. And you can, in the chat, you can connect and make all these discussions. So I think there are swings and slides. You lose something, but you get something else in return.
Yeah. Christian is knocking, same experience for you.
So one of the things that I'm really missing, and I realize that more and more in the online world, is all the other types of communication that we also have. I'm not only talking about the nonverbal kinds of communication, but for example, if I agree with Neil and I'm nodding, he doesn't know that I'm nodding to him because it could be to somebody else. So in a real classroom, you see two students were on the same line, they agreed, they just look into their eyes and they say, yes, we think the same thing about what's been said. So we're missing all that because you don't know at which person I'm looking. Maybe I'm just looking at myself all the time, which also is annoying. And the other thing that annoys me is if I go into the breakout sessions, which I really love, I can quickly go there, but I'm just there right away. So in a VR environment, that's much better because you can knock on, you can step in slowly, but in Zoom, for example, you're just there, and people either are disturbed because I interrupt their discussion, or they just even realize that I'm there, and then that's creepy as well to be there.
But Christian, you can get comments in the chat that otherwise people wouldn't make. I mean, that's incredible. They say thank you and whatever.
Yes, I fully agree. That's what I mean. Other people are participating now, and that's really great.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up with that. I think one of the things that's very interesting here is the difference between being in a virtual environment on the desktop and the degree to which you might be able to express yourself, and going in on a headset where your ability to express yourself goes much higher, and will be higher with each next new generation of headsets with technology. So and the students that were wearing the VR headsets in Notopia were very apparent to others, largely because they had hands, and therefore they're pointing and they can wave, and then they're doing all these things that is much more natural in terms of that interaction, to know who's interacting with who. But you can also have things in the world that can't happen in the real world for you as a teacher, that makes it a lot easier. So avatars may for instance, their heads may bob to show that they're talking, and you can see that from a distance. So you know who's talking in the worlds, in the different groups at a distance, which you wouldn't be able to do with students in the real world. So you start to have new enhancements beyond the real spaces.
That's true, and I think everyone has made that experience in the past 2 years, Gary. I might want to wrap up with probably one final question, because you're all on the forefront of, well, so let's say digital experience or digital learning, digital teaching. And I'm wondering, what type of role do you see for really the physical university? And probably quickly, Maruf, you can probably elaborate on that. What type of importance does the physical space still have, or do you just don't see that importance at all anymore?
I mean, I'd get in trouble if I said there's no importance, for sure. But I mean, even personally, I believe it's so powerful when a kind of a mentor sits with another person and a student, and I feel like it's a biological. And it's very hard to replicate. You can get so far in the VR space, absolutely. Students feel really focused when they're in a headset and they're there, and they feel really present in that environment, 100%. But there is something about sitting with another human being which right now can't be replicated as much. And I think what I see, these types of technologies is doing is removing all the other distractions away from that moment, so that everything else can be done in VR, or a lot of it can be done in VR, and the time that's left that you have with another person can be used in such a more powerful way. And it's not, it almost feels like it's wasted right now when you see what's possible with the technology and how much you can move into that space. And I feel like it's going to open up a new role for a lot of educators, much more one-to-one time with them. We rolled out a VR degree at Arizona State University where they sent headsets out to students, and they would do almost the entire lesson, like the entire degree, in a headset. But then they would come to campus, and the professors felt like they had a much more deep experience with the students, because they weren't talking about the subject matter necessarily or like checking the learning goals. They were actually having a discussion and a real human-to-human discussion. And I think that is where we can really highlight that and elevate that, I think, in terms of the time that's available for it.
Yeah. Before wrapping up, probably one more person. Yeah, Neil, and then we.
Maybe I could be the provocative. I mean, we couldn't do this, right, unless we were online. So one-to-one, but you can connect with people in China, for goodness sake. I mean, this is an incredible possibility. I also think just beyond the kind of environmental side of things, it's actually opening up the new chapter in what education could be all about, because you haven't got to pay for buildings, you haven't got to pay for maintenance, you haven't got to pay for for caretakers and things. You could set up an online university now and reduce the cost of education by a huge amount by doing that. I mean, I think the savings are they outweigh the problem, personally. I think it's a new whole domain.
You should work for us, Neil.
Yeah.
Exactly like we're also trying to promote. Yeah, 100%.
Cool. With that final note, thanks for all giving a view on what you're working on and how the metaverse is the meta-ediverse is evolving. And I still love sitting physically, or I would have loved sitting physically in the same room with you and probably going for a chit chat afterwards. But with that probably being said, because I think it's a different experience, but with that being said, I hand over again to Camilla, who's going to take over for the final session. And thank you very much for giving your insights here.
From my side, thank you also from my side. Super interesting, really, to see the innovative projects you have going on right now. We're going to get more physical again with our next speakers, who think that new learning approaches need definitely new space structure. And our next guest is Anna Priel, and she thinks that new teaching requires new spaces. She is a project manager at the Center for Higher Education Development, CHE, and she researches the topic of future-oriented learning space design. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you very much.
When you're ready, you can start sharing your screen.
All right. I just needed a few seconds to organize myself here.
Perfect.
Thank you again, Camilla, for your introduction. And let me quickly. Okay. That you see a black screen now. That's on purpose. So I've been listening to most of the talks, and I'm afraid I'm going to repeat a lot of things, but maybe I can shape it a little differently, because I realized that creating future learning spaces, as I call it, I label it in my talk, involves a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, and a very important group of stakeholders is the students, you. So I'm talking especially to you, and participating and understanding the needs and the goals on the other side, and they're very important to create future and sustainable learning spaces. So it's really wonderful to have all these input from outside you created in this conference. But I'm also I like to set the message also to help you get empowered and engaged in creating learning spaces for the future together. And so I'm inviting you to my learning journey, to learning space design and future-oriented learning space design. And I guess we talked a lot about new learning and what learning in the future means, or learning at least actually now means. And I brought some examples that show how new learning approaches can be put into practice. And you also see some examples that you've already seen. So I'm also very excited to listen to Pete after my talk, because he's from a technical university in Delft, and I'm involving this example from the Faculty of Architecture. And I'm happy to get some feedback from you and get engaged with you to my thoughts and approaches. And my learning journey began like 4 years ago with gathering with experts and using our platform, the Hochschulforum Digitalisierung, to create awareness of physical learning spaces, because we come from a very technological perspective. And I figured that this can't be all of it. The entire digital transformation also shapes the places where we study. So I was lucky to publish some papers with the Hochschulforum Digitalisierung, and I also was able to look at some examples in Europe, what they're doing differently, and also was invited to a podcast to talk about what I'm talking about. And my job is to look at examples, to find trends, and to put them into perspective, but also not just to find examples and talk about it. My job is also or what I want to do more is to look behind the scenes and to look how these learning space projects or learning space projects were put into practice, because it's a long process. And it was, like I said, a lot of stakeholders, and in the entire process of putting together a concept that is sustainable and future oriented, it can be complicated. And I want to to look a little bit further into it, and also in the future, and with students together. New learning, what do I mean with it? I think this picture is it means a lot to me, because I've been asking myself the same question: why do we teach like this? So rows, and in one direction, it's very, you have a hierarchy of students and teacher, and this has been the way for several hundred of years. But learning is actually this. So you learn with external input, you learn in groups and in a dialogue. You need to experiment, you need to learn, you have emotional experiences to really learn something. So what's happening in practice and in your brain is totally different from the old school concept of teaching. And there has been a lot of new approaches or new perspectives on how to put this into practice. Like, for example, project-based learning. This would be a method of what new learning can look like. So it's a lot more practical, and it's also about collaborating. We heard a lot about collaboration. And these are skills that are trained with this kind of method that is, I believe, very important, not just for the future. It's already important to understand other people, to communicate your thoughts, to create ideas together, to put yourself on the other side, and work on new solutions. And this also has to do with communicative skills. And you don't train these kind of skills by listening for 90 minutes in a lecture. Of course, you train other skills, but there needs to be a new balance, I believe. And it's about, like I said, new skills, digital working skills. It's about how to express myself. It's about how I use my brain also with others, and so on and so forth. So project-based learning could be an example of new learning approaches. And you see that you can't really train these kind of skills if you have a setting like this. I stole this from your website, and maybe you can see yourself sitting in this lecture hall at the university. But there are also other examples that show how the traditional learning spaces in higher education institutions in Germany. But there are examples, like I said, I wanted to bring some examples who thought about what new learning means and how they can implement it into practice and into the student and study life. The Code University in Berlin, maybe you heard of it. It's a very young university founded a couple of years ago, and their teaching method or their teaching approach is totally based on projects. So they do have little lecture settings, but they team up through the entire semester with other students, and they have to work on real projects. And throughout this process, that is always guided with a teacher, with a professor, and I believe they can train these skills that I've talked about earlier, like communication, collaborating, and so on and so forth, creating new ideas. And they have team spaces specially made for these occasions. They have also casual meeting places, so meeting other people, not just in a formal setting like a seminar or a lecture, but also talking to other students, having a cafe, or they also meet professors, teachers here. That's also part of their design, their learning space design. So meeting people by accident and then talk about what they're working on and maybe what they're missing. So they always stay in touch. And they also have this idea of creating a community campus. They have some similar approaches like Delft. There are a lot of companies also based in this building where they have their university, and they gather with these companies, mostly tech companies, for their projects. So, and everyone's meeting everybody on every level of this building, and this is the goal, to have this community campus. And creating these team spaces and this entire learning space concept is not just made by the people who are planning this, but planning new rooms, new spaces. They always involve students. So there's always a task force that involves students to have their thoughts, their needs right there to develop their spaces further. This is an ongoing process. So they do this every semester. They evaluate how these spaces are working and if it's the right, or do we need to change anything? And like I said, students are always a part of it. And there's Technical University Delft. You've seen this photo before, maybe from a slightly different angle. But I like this example so much because it shows how you can create an open space concept and see how lively this campus life can be. And you have several larger tables here where students can gather. This is the faculty, the architecture faculty here. You heard the sad story about the burnt down building, which created a lot of urgency to find a quick and new solution, and this is the result. And of course, they have an advantage. They are architects who built this, and so they already had a vision of a very lively campus environment there. So everything is very open, and you see the material, it's glass, you see what's going on. And they wanted to create this form of transparency, so you don't have this single cell offices anymore. They also implemented a new work approach, a flex working concept, where you don't have these fixed working hours or working offices, there where you need to book your place, book a room when you need to have some privacy. Or so basically the message here is they formed a very open space concept. And also what I found in all the examples that I was looking at is that they embrace these casual meetings. So they want to have areas where people can just gather and meet and exchange ideas, and with outside of a very formal setting like the lecture or the seminar. And the third example that I wanted to show you is the Technical University of Applied Science in Mittelhessen. This is the library, and a couple of years ago they had the chance to reorganize everything, and they had a very that's what they tell other people about their journey. They were in a not a good place at this time, and the service wasn't working. They were really unsatisfied, also the people who were working at the library, and they wanted to create a completely new concept. And not just speaking of the interior design and what kind of offering you can have there, but also combining it with services, with learning services, and with workshops on how to do scientific work, writing, and for example. And they used 50% of the area that was occupied with books. They were able to, they were able to create 50% more space, by getting rid of books that were very old and not used anymore, also because of the digitalization or digital services. And so they were able to create much more space for group work, for project work, for meeting other students. And they created these areas where you have to work quietly, where you have where you have spaces for yourself, and also where you can communicate. And so these different areas also have different rules how you interact there. And they were very happy with this outcome, and the students as well. So this is another photo from their communicative area where you also have access to cafes and all of that. And so this creates this atmosphere of also welcoming the students there, invite them to stay and meet and work on on different projects. Quick takeaways for me or for you. Future learning spaces offer variety, and we also heard this before. It's about supporting more individual learning scenarios, no one-size-fits-all solution. And like for mass lectures, future learning spaces also embrace casual meetings. That's what I saw in every example that I was looking into and talking to the people. That was a very main goal. So putting the people and connecting people and collaboration in the center of a concept. That's a very good sign. So not just talking about technology, but talking about how we bring people together through architectural structures. And very important learning for me was, because we were really coming from this technological perspective, is that creating spaces where you can have these new or put into practice these new learning approaches is also part of the digital transformation. And like I said, my message to you, as all the students who are still listening and beyond is become one of these change makers who are who bring in their ideas for future learning. And I think it's very important that students become part of this process and participate in creating future learning spaces together. And Hochschulforum Digitalisierung, who I work for, or this is the main project that I'm involved in, it's a very important goal for us to work together with students, create new ideas, also empowering them to raise their ideas and communicate them back into their institutions. So if you want to stay in touch, please stay in touch. I would love to hear more from you, and we can exchange more ideas, and maybe also how you can get involved as a change maker. So feel free. And thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Anna. Thank you for those insights and that motivation. And now I'm going to welcome our last speaker of today, who's also an expert in digitalization, who works on physical spaces and how to make our spaces from today suitable for future learning. Directly from the Netherlands, Piet van der Zanden. Hi, Piet. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
If you want, you can start sharing your screen. It works perfect. The floor is yours.
Okay,
Then
you see the screen? Okay, then I will start. Thank you. My name is Piet van der Zanden. I'm from Delft University of Technology. You heard it before. I think our university is a bit similar like your Technical University of München. And I want to talk about the physical spaces and where we work on, and also the influence that the last 2 years had on that. So talking about education related qualities of spaces. The first thing I want to say is the video conference technologies that were brought in during the pandemic have helped us to overcome let's say the step from physical to online practices. And now we have a discussion that most people think that is the infrastructure that we have to build on. And I do not agree. First of all, I want to say that I work at an IT organization, the department. We work together with real estate, with education, with the facility management. So we have a broad aspect and a broad approach to all these spaces. Where do we go to? First, I want to show this education spaces framework, which have 3 rows and 3 columns. And why 3 rows? Because most of the talks tonight were about new online spaces, new forms, but we still need this frontal pedagogy. We need this instruction and lectures from teachers to explain to us the formula writing, how do you do the mathematics, and how do you get a global introduction of these courses. And of course, a very important one is the participatory practice, these interactive way of working groups, where you do assignments together. And the most difficult one is the joint problem solving, where you have these complex, ill-structured problems that you have to face with several students from different disciplines to make, for instance, a solar car or an exoskeleton or other very hard to design projects. In the columns, you see the space domains, physical, that's where I'm in. Of course, the online is already for many years in practice, and the hybrid one is more or less the forced one. And that is very hard. And I want to discuss why we must not think light about hybrid practices. Because What you see now is since the last 2 years, many companies came in and they all have their what they call hybrid solutions for us as higher education. But I don't think so, because a learning activity is not the same as talking in a meeting. And all these equipment do only have one video channel and one audio channel. And if you work in groups or you work with different classes or different places, different locations, you really need more video streams, more audio streams, and you need to cope with that. And that's the next one, because there are so many cues coming in. How can this teaching staff deal with that? And of course you say, oh, we do some teaching assistance, but as a teacher, okay, you want help in the beginning, but you do not want to be dependent on the teaching assistant because you want to be in charge yourself. The next question for me is, how can these physical classes, they do support these very hard project teams, but how do you shift those into the hybrid domain? I can see it today, but I'm open for new ideas. And in the other domain, the online domain, so many things. We saw some examples tonight about augmented and virtual reality, and how do you shift that into this hybrid domain? So there are a lot of things to think about. They are still unanswered, and my question would be, okay, let's think about those things, but also look at today. How are our present teaching and learning spaces doing? Uh, are they up to date, or are they still yesterdays, if I may use that word? Because I see many institutions and many other uh, universities still having very old-fashioned classrooms and lecture halls and other things, while they are focusing on just one new interactive space, and their installed base of about tens, about sometimes hundreds of education spaces still are in this yesterday state. So my question would be, I have three questions. Can you read the subject matter in this normal space? Because if you have done that, then you can easily, let's say, make the transformation into the hybrid domain. The second one is about ergonomics. Can you sit there all day? And of course, can you hear the teacher talking? So my advice would be, start by checking this current qualitative situation. For instance, it's a simple question. Do you have enough power sockets in place? Because students cannot do without it. Can you read the subject matter in the back row? Because what I see all the time is that characters are too small. And if I go to an optician and I want to buy new glasses, then I expect to have 100% visual acuity. So why is that not in most of the lecture halls and classroom today? It's about character recognition. If you see the formulas for the first time in your new math classes, you really have to discern these strange new Greek characters instead of your word recognition in your native language. It's totally different if you have this 100% visual acuity or only 60. Next to that, of course, it depends on where you are in the classroom, but can you see it well? Because there is only a very tiny spot in your eyes, about 30 degrees wide and 10 degrees high, to follow and discern this character. So you really had to follow these sentences and the lines. And if you are in the first row and your skull hits your spine within 25 degrees, then you are really stretching your back, and you don't want to have that in these 2-hour blocks all day. It's not only horizontal, it's also vertical, of course, because your neck strains after 35 degrees. And then you turn your back over, and that's why we always advise in flat level classrooms, take revolving chairs, turnable chairs, so you don't have any back complaints from the students any longer. And if you have an amphitheater, do it with a radius, so people at the sides can really focus more easily to the central screen. In flat level holes, is the screen readable from all the places? Is the baseline or the underside of the screen, is it on the right position? And what do you think about all sort of constructions that we have? And the lighting, I see it so many times that the lighting really destroys the quality, the image. And what do you think about when the sun comes in spring and in autumn? I see it all the time that it's just forgotten. And if you know it beforehand, then it's easily to take care within your building. But afterwards, it costs lots of money. Of course, the acoustics and the climate. About the acoustics, I will come back to it in a minute. But all these pieces come up to what we call a perceived image quality at the end. And that's what we see as a student in class. We can measure the quality of it. And if we follow some standards from AVIXA, that is the World Trade Organization of AV, then we can grab figures of it and we can improve it, or not, of course. But just to have a little example, this is my own spine, and on the left side, maybe you see it, I have a hernia over there, but you don't see it on the right side. And up here are the contrast, the system contrast ratios. So although you have very fine details as a teacher, but the system in the classroom is not good, then you lose all the details of your fine work. I want to say something about the sound levels, because we have buildings that are most of the time a few decades old, and they were developed at that time without voice amplification. It wasn't there. Everybody talked just in the classroom. But today, voice amplification is standard, not only to amplify the voice, but also to record lecture capture, etc. What we also see is that presentations had more videos, more audio, and if you have a proper sound system, then there is much more acoustic sound within the classroom next to these active learning practices. Because if you compare discussions in a restaurant, then you have this extra noise about it, and all these things count to it, and you hear it in the space next doors. And if you are having a very concentrating class where you have to peer for the formulas and you have the sound on your left ear, it's not that nice. So really think those things over, and with new buildings we have to take care of that too. What I want to say is just what Churchill said in his days: we shape our buildings and afterwards our buildings shape us. And what he wants to say is, okay, we have to do with what we have, and we fit in. And okay, if this ceiling is too low, then we can only have a lower screen or a smaller screen. If there are pillars, then we cannot use those corners in that room, etc., etc. But that is just the physical constraints of the space, but also the affordances, the technologies, and the possibilities that must come in to support hybrid or online or other mixed practices. They must be there beforehand, because if they are not there, teachers cannot use it, and educational change will not come forward. And you always have this chicken egg discussion where you want to ask all the teachers, what do you need? But the answer is always what they need on that day on, and not thinking about tomorrow's new practices. So I want to conclude with this last slide. Think about the quality of the education spaces of today and make them up to date to today. And let's move from the yesterday's places, but At the same time, think about which infrastructure do you need for certain classes. If you do have specifically practices that you need on campus, they are totally different than the practice that you need online. So you have another infrastructure for that probably, although a networking does help all the way, especially if you want to combine this campus and online into some sort of hybrid practices. So I want to stress again, think about today's quality first before you go forward. I want to thank you for your attention.
And we thank you. Thank you very much, because I could relate actually to a lot of pictures that you showed. I remember sitting in a lecture hall 3 years ago, and one day I forgot my glasses and I had to use my cell phone to watch the script from the professor. So I could really relate to the examples you showed. And I actually want to ask my first question to Anne, and it is, for example, I don't see myself right now going to university for a lecture. I could do it at home perfectly. I could repeat it also and take notes, everything a little bit more up to my in my time. And do you think there's a trend there? Do you think that the corona pandemic set a trend which says that we will not use those lecture halls again the way we used to do it?
At least I see a discussion starting, like you said, Camilla, and debating about it. There's more awareness, let's put it that way. And it also always depends on the subject. But I do see discussions that these mass lectures where you sit in one lecture hall with 800 students and listening to some introduction to economics, it doesn't need to be on campus anymore. You could do it in an online setting. I heard also one professor saying all mass lectures, more than 100 people, that doesn't make sense in a physical on campus anymore. You can put it differently. And what I'm trying to address also, and we heard it a couple of times, is to this development is also it creates more diversity. And I believe you said it earlier, Camilla, as well. So this learning environment for you, having your lecture online at home, it's suitable for you and it's perfect. And there are other people who can you attend the campus, who don't have this maybe safe and quiet environment at home to do it, or they could go to the library or any other space that's available. So at least there's a movement that everything is shaking up right now, and I believe, and I also wish for to have a movement and more debate and more awareness around are really these mass lecture halls appropriate, or could we use the space otherwise with more areas for collaboration, for meetings and experimenting, maker spaces, and so on. That's it.
Yes.
If I may react to that, because we are making a new education building, and they were really asking for large halls, not the teachers, but the students, because also what we call social cohesion. You want to do it together. You want to. It's next to the building. You want, like, let's say, emotionally be bounded by the environment, and for introduction and the first year classes, they really want these large lecture halls. Although, if you have a discussion about the pedagogy, about the didactics, okay, your learning component is quite differently. But if you are explained by a teacher how a certain process of mathematics is going on, uh, you don't want to interact, you want to follow that, you want to listen to this derivation and why these steps are taken. So it's dependent on, of course, the let's say the level of cognitivism that you need at that moment, but it is also dependent if you have, for instance, design, engineering compared to construction engineering, compared to science courses, compared to let's say language courses, are all different. So you need a palette of different spaces specifically for different purposes. So that's also why I say this hybrid isn't the fit for all, but that's what they want to stress out. But really focus on the practice and the space, the domain. Is it physical? Is it hybrid, or is it online? Which fits with this specific, let's say, didactics.
Mhm. I totally agree. I wouldn't put it in any other words. So it's about a good portfolio that fits the teaching approach.
Yes.
Mhm.
And to add to that, of course, and we are also working on our curriculum by the year of 2025, we want to have what we call collaborative design engineering into the curriculum, because you cannot learn doing things by just listening. You have to do it and indeed get it done. That's the topic. Just do it. We heard this tonight, but those are the things, and working together and understand each other as engineers from different faculties. You really had to see each other. I think you cannot do that online. You really have to feel that you have to. There are so many more signals that you need when you, let's say, tune the different methodologies and the different aspects and the different ontologies, the different definitions to match to each other's, let's say, capabilities to make some sort of project, robotic or whatever. It's so complex. I don't think you can do that online, especially not in the beginning. Okay, when your team is set, when you understand each other, then you can do it from different places, but not from the start on, I think.
I have to say that I completely agree. I mean, you definitely need that human to human contact. And I have thought actually a lot about all the people who started studying to 2020. Like, how are their social contacts? Have they met people? How are they feeling? Is
Yes.
their psychological health? Such questions have arisen actually since Corona, and a lot of students miss actually that social life in campus. So
Absolutely.
I think it's an important topic because, for example, a lot of universities have set up tools to watch online lectures and Zoom accounts for everyone to work together. But I think that social contact has missed until now, and I don't know in how extent universities have the responsibility also to go beyond just learning and creating that social interaction between students, and also between working also between employees and professors, because it's not the same seeing each other just through a screen, through a camera.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are now talking about what we call the formal spaces, the teaching and learning spaces. But of course, you have the student workplaces where they work together. And Anna gave some nice examples where students can come together and communicate and collaborate, but can work and can do their homework next to the maker spaces. And tonight we saw from Professor Cole's also Cole, yes, from Köln,
Exactly. Cool.
very nice spaces where students had to work together, and it's learning and socializing. It's a combination, but you cannot do these projects if you do not have basic skills already, and those are in those boring formal lecture halls. You have to start there. So
Completely. Yes, we see here in the comments, mankind must meet physically. Only in this way it can survive. How many of the
agreed.
speakers and guests have met your partner in this environment? I think what's meant is in digital environment, right? Well, that's a very good question. And um, maybe if you want to add something, Anne, on the importance of physical environments, even though we have so many digital tools right now.
Um, Thank you for this question. And I'm afraid I'm repeating myself, also repeating thoughts from other speakers. It's really about having a good mix, having a good portfolio and opportunities to come together when needed for the right purpose. And we are, as people, and as Matthias also is typing in the chat, we are analog, and we only have this body, and we're not avatars hopping around outside. So and digital tools, they make our analog life easier. They help us to structure our work days, structure our documents, communicate with each other, and not being in the same room. And though there are a lot of advantages, and yet it doesn't make any sense to work like this, isolated all the time. So, but having not being forced to anywhere to collaborate, or I don't know, but having a good mix, having a good portfolio, having options where you can decide and to come together. So there's no black or white, or no, or just physical or digital. So it has to be a healthy mix and healthy options. That's what I believe. And I did meet people online, so, but I also met people in the physical world. So, and lovely people in both worlds. So that's my comment to that.
And actually, you're right. I have also met people online, which are also lovely people. We cannot leave that aside. And um, I actually have learned a lot through the digital world. So it's completely, as you said, a balance between both of them. And that's why we have to have such discussions right now to see in how extent do we combine them, and how we use potential of both for future professionals who need also different skills right now. I want to ask the last question, and it's because we have heard a lot about CEUDEV. Um, Pete, how was your experience there, just for interest? Because Anna presented El Pascale to you work there. So how do you feel in that environment, and how do you see the students there?
Yeah, personally, I'm proud that I work at Delft University of Technology because since I think about 10 to 15 years ago, education became important. Uh, we used to be, let's say, research professors. That was the only career that you could have if you make papers or research, etc. But the very good uh, teachers, they couldn't become professor, and now they can just by doing good teaching and good instruction and good practices. So education became important, and especially for such reason, they got what we call a teaching lab, or some sort of hub where these teachers can come together and drink coffee, good coffee, I believe, with beans, etc., and all sorts. But regularly they meet with each other, and now there's a complete teaching academy built upon it. And at the same time, our building Pulse, and you've been there in the Pulse building. That's an education building. Oh, we used to have all our lecture halls and classroom within the faculty buildings. And what you have, if you have a faculty building, then the dean decides if how much money goes to the research facilities, how much money to the offices of these researchers, and if there is something left, then you can make perhaps a little classroom. That was the really what it was, and those classrooms were in a bad situation. And we made a project in 2013 where we wrote a roadmap to transform all these classrooms and lecture halls and make them up to date, up to today's standards. That's why I have some sort of experience with it. And we really work together with teachers from all the faculties, with students, and with all the departments. We really work together with real estate and with education and with facility management and AV and ICT. And we, in the beginning, it was first some people who were working with passion on it, but now it's a complete governance model. It's completely implemented, and we really think through all the time how we must install and implement these technologies. And of course, we have the same problem now with this hybrid. A lot of this technology was brought in, but it's, yeah, I think it's conventional because you can have a camera and a microphone and you can talk online, so you can do a meeting, but you cannot learn and doing the same learning activities that you normally have in classrooms and in the online domain. And but we are all open to it, and I'm very proud that we really work together to make it better. And next to that, university is here. We say get it done, because by the year of 2030 we want to be carbon neutral all over campus. And it's quite a big campus. It's more than 160 hectares, so it's quite a big one. And we work on several ways and several let's say levels to work on that. And I don't have time tonight, but I have so much to tell about how we tackled, for instance, all the equipment in the classroom and all the furniture by doing refurbished things, by doing energy, let's say, neutral ways for all the equipment, but also the equipment itself. So we really working hard as a university to work on this, what they call the energy transformation.
Great to hear that. And well, personally, I might go to TU in the summer semester of
You're most
2023.
welcome.
So I hope I can see that next year.
Okay, yes. So if you are here, just call me.
Of
I
course.
will show you around.
Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of our evening. I want to thank you all for your incredible participation today. A lot of people joined us today, and I think we all learned a lot from this evening from different perspectives too. And I hope this discussion keeps on going. We will later share a recording of this session so it reaches more people. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you for being a host. Our
Yes,
host.
thank you very much, Camilla.
If you want
Have a nice
to,
evening.
yes,
Yeah.
you too. If you want to stay in contact, you have our contacts.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Good evening.